Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome to another edition of Encrypted Connections, a special Thursday edition. Um, Obviously, last night we kind of went off the cuff. We had a couple people come in and pinch hit, but tonight the slugger's back. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Chuck Norris of Bigfooting. Everybody, I'd like to
Uh,
introduce Aleksandar Petakov. Thank you for being here, man. I really appreciate it. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I'm sorry about last night. I hate when things like that happen that are out of your control, and I was watching as our YouTube channel, Small Town Monsters, was about to get 100,000 subscribers, which we hit last night. But I'm watching the
Amazing.
counter all day, and of course, like the last 50 subscribers, I'm having dinner with the computer next to me, and we're watching it, and all of a sudden the power goes out, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Of all times this could possibly happen." So my cell service wasn't good enough to even send a text message out. So I ran out the house, drove to town, and it was literally right when I messaged you too. It was towards the end, towards 8 o'clock. I'm like, "Hey man, so I'm not gonna be able to do this, but thanks for bearing with me."
Of course, man. I would have. You didn't have to run out. I would have figured something went wrong, but that just, I appreciate it. Just kind of speaks to the type of person you are, and that's, I said it in the text. Beyond everything else, I'm a fan of the subject, and I love watching this stuff, reading this stuff, and it's always a pleasure for me to be able to talk to people that I watched and looked up to in certain ways. And you were one of them. And then to find out on top of that, that those people are good human beings, because some aren't. Sometimes you get let down. So
Yeah.
when you meet somebody that you look up to and they're a good human being on top of it, it just makes it that much better. And so I appreciate it. I'm so glad you're here tonight, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I know we've been talking for a while, and happy to come on. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's a good point. Don't idolize people. I don't want anyone to feel that way about me. We're just guys that like to have fun out there in the woods, and we have a passion for the subject, obviously. But I've made the mistake before of idolizing heroes, and you find out they're not as great as you thought. So
yeah.
I prefer to think of people as kind of colleagues instead of heroes or idols, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. And I think the more that you, at least for me, the more that I started to meet some of these people. If I don't want to say it like that, because the majority of them were very good. Um,
Right.
but when you have a couple who are really bad, right? Like kind of just even they exceed, even like if you thought they could be bad, possibly they exceed that.
Oh,
Um,
it's crazy. I've experienced it all, man. Like there's
yeah.
some people. Wow, they're bad, but I don't want to focus on the bad.
No.
I've met
No.
some of the best people that I know through this topic. Bigfoot and cryptozoology and the weird. I've met some fantastic people that I trust with my life, especially out in the woods. So you need some of that. There's always going to be crazy, and I'm sure you have other hobbies and passions as well.
Sure.
Probably see the same overlap. Where you ever get people, you're going to get toxic individuals, toxic like subsets of a community. Happens in all, the backpacking community. It may not be as extreme, but there's definitely just as many fractures. So you just take your pick on whatever. Car people, they got very very opinionated. So
Oh
you, oh,
yeah.
you you're a piece of crap just because you drive that car. So
Yeah.
so there's a lot of that sort of stuff. But I think that's just humans in general.
Of
We like to
course.
click and we like to tribe up. So but anyway, yeah.
So let me say hi to a couple people first, because speaking to that, right, with when you have you've met so many good people. I've only been doing this for like 3 months, man. It's pretty new. Um, I thought about doing it for a long time, but I always said I was gonna, and then I never did. And then I finally took the plunge and said, you know what? Why not? Like I needed something to do for me too.
Right.
And
I had seen
so
your interview with Carrie, and
yeah.
then obviously we were on Doug's show together, and that was very interesting. But I thought that was a pretty interesting start, with Carrie and everything.
Well, that he was the reason that I even thought about starting this for real. Like,
Yeah.
really was like, okay, maybe I can do this, because he was just such a great guy, and he just like
Man,
he
he
lifted
was.
you up. He was like,
Yeah,
man, you have something to share it, go share it, go give it to the people who need to hear it.
he
And
was a
I didn't
great,
believe
great
it.
host.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I had the pleasure of going on a show a few times in the past few years, and I had him on my show. I think it was maybe a year or two ago at this point, and I actually met him for the first time in person this past summer. I was at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot conference as a speaker, and he just came out of nowhere and was like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" Got to meet him and talk to him, and that's why I was really sad to hear that. A couple months later, obviously, rest in peace. That was definitely a blow. I mean, he was people loved him. He was a great guy. Clearly, I mean, had a following for a reason, not just because he put out interesting content and talked to a lot of folks, but you could tell because of the type of person he was. So that was definitely a blow.
Yeah, for sure. Devastating. I tell people all the time, I'm like, he was like a giant walking hug. He just made you feel safe. It's just
Yeah,
kind of the way he made you feel, like you were his friend forever, and you were safe when you were talking to him.
his
Um,
encounter was incredible as well. I mean,
oh
his
yeah,
encounter and your encounter are both, in somewhere in my kind of archives of very, the top interesting encounters. I've got a bunch of those, but they definitely his was, when I interviewed him, was absolutely in that spot because of the reaction and everything, and then hearing yours and kind of being able to dissect it on Doug's show was, I thought, really interesting. We did that.
yeah, and he well, part of the reason that I decided to do that with him. I mean, he asked me a few times, and I had said no over and over.
Right.
And then I finally, gave in. But part of the reason was because of the way that he talked to me about the way that he
Yeah.
explained it, the way that he explained how much purging that helped him. And, that I'm glad I did. I'm honored. There was a lot of weight that came with being the last interview.
Yeah. Can imagine.
Yeah, it was tough for a while, but that's like, whatever. That's my stuff. Like I kind of
Sure.
took it on, like, for whatever reason, guilty, this, that, whatever. But I'm just so grateful that I did it, because, you know, it is what it is, and it's sad, and he's gone, and he was a good friend. That's all. He was a good friend.
Yeah, he was a really, really great guy.
Yeah,
From times I interact with him, top notch guy for sure.
for sure. So speaking about good people, like I said, doing this for 3 months, man, and in the beginning, I couldn't believe how fast it took off. It went from that one video, the first video I put out, which I literally thought, like, nobody's gonna watch this, right? It was for me, and then like a day or two later, I was like watching the subscribers go up by like 50 a day, 30 a day. And to me, that was a lot. Like, I'm like, holy cow, what is going on here? But the group that I have of people who come to watch this show, is just such an amazing group of people. I mean, really, like, from top to bottom, they are, it's like a family, man. Everybody knows everybody. Nobody gets lost in the shuffle. Most of us talk outside of here, even, and so I feel really, really blessed to have these people as part of my life now, and a lot of them are here right now, and so thank you guys for being here. I love you guys, all of you, and I
I do
mean,
gotta say, there's a lot of familiar faces in the chat. A lot of the folks that I used to have in my live stream chat as well. I'm seeing like Sharon, Francesca E, Can
yeah,
Swatch, Brian and Chewy. So Brian is actually a personal friend of mine.
yeah.
We've been out in the field together. He's an awesome, awesome guy. Hope you're feeling better, dude. I know he kind of messed up his shoulder with a hike here up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire recently, but
Right.
yeah, it's just cool because, like, again, Brown Dwarf. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat, so it's kind of familiar. I feel a lot of these folks gravitate towards the same kind of chats and stuff, which I think is awesome.
It is awesome, man. It is. And matter of fact, I just was watching a Brian and Chewy video yesterday that I never watched, and I apologized to him because I thought I was subbed to his channel for a long time, and apparently I wasn't subbed. But it was the video where he found the trackway, the two tracks crossing the road.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, man.
That was the one that we got to do Bigfoot Beyond the Trail episode on.
Right.
They literally called me like they found that the morning. It was Brian and our buddy Evan, who has a page called New Hampshire Sasquatch. Is an area where he claims to have seen one a few years ago. And it was like Saturday morning, 9-10 a.m. And I get this frantic multiple text messages and calls like, dude, we found something interesting. Please get out here. We need help. Luckily, I had nothing going on, but I was like, oh, crap, I don't have any plaster. So I went to Home Depot, got some plaster of Paris, and raced out there. And we spent like all day out there. We casted those footprints and just scoured the whole area. And then we went back there a couple weeks later, actually, to do some kind of investigating. But yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool video. So let me ask you, and I know this is a question you've been asked a million times over and over, I'm sure, especially doing these things. But for the people who don't know, and since this is your first time on this show, can you tell us what it was that got you started and interested in this topic?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, specifically when I was a kid, my dad told me the story of the Yeti, and he gave me this figurine. It was like a Shadow Box was the ones that made it. They had a Loch Ness Monster, a Bigfoot, an alien, and a Yeti. And it was very detailed. It's not like the toys today. You could throw this at somebody and it wouldn't feel very good. It was a solid kind of thing. And it came with this little scroll that looked like an ancient kind of papyrus scroll with the story of the Yeti. And I was with my family in the mountains when he told me the story. He gave it to me, and just something, looking up in the hills and seeing that, just kind of the Yeti, I don't know, instantly that was my hook. That's what got me into it. So after that, I started, just watching documentaries on the topic. I was always interested in nature and other things as well. And, just as I got older, just was kind of an armchair researcher. I used to read a lot of the blogs back in the day before like really social media was a big thing. Crypto Mundo, a lot of these blogs, that was the place where you got your information. This was even pre-YouTube. When YouTube came out, then there was like these compilations of Google image cryptids, every picture of Bigfoot, put it, and people would put music, and it was just so different than what it is today. I'll say that. But got into that, and then when I got older, actually when I was in school, I kind of lost interest for a little bit, and then Finding Bigfoot was on, and I started watching Finding Bigfoot. I thought, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then it wasn't until afterwards, about 2015, that I started going out and interviewing people, and I really wanted to get out in the field and kind of see what, I was kind of a believer then. I didn't really know a whole lot about Bigfoot practically, in terms of research. I had spent time in the woods. I did some survivalism / naturalism training in high school. So kind of knew my way around the woods a little bit, and thought to myself, well, let's start looking into this Bigfoot stuff. I want to do my own documentaries on this. I've grown up on all the classics, but let's actually look into it. So I started looking into it, and I got hooked. And the more and more people I talked to, the more interesting it became. And I had some of my own experiences that kind of have led me more onto the side that, I feel pretty good about saying I think these things exist, whatever they are. That's obviously a huge question, but up until this point today, looking back just 6-7 years, a lot has definitely changed in terms of my experience in getting out there in the woods. So yeah, that's sort of the origin story. I didn't have a sighting. A lot of times I talk to people in this subject, it's either they had a sighting or an experience, or they saw like the Patterson and Gimlin film or something along those lines. But mine was that specific event of learning about the Yeti. So that's why I want to go to Nepal someday and look for the Yeti in the Himalayas.
Oh, that's amazing. What mountains were you guys driving through when he gave you the statue? I'm curious.
It was the White Mountains of New Hampshire, actually.
Oh, okay. So there's a history there, man.
So home turf, and New Hampshire. I've hiked a lot of the mountains up there, like Brian and Chewy have. It's just beautiful place, kind of my stomping grounds. I'm blessed now to be able to go really around the country and see what other incredible nature there is to offer. But the White Mountains definitely have a special place, and I'm sure you've been up there, so you kind of know what I'm talking about. A lot of people don't know that maybe aren't from the Northeast, aren't too familiar with the White Mountains and just how rugged they are. And ask people that have hiked the Appalachian Trail. Some of the toughest sections are up here in this this neck of the woods. So
Absolutely.
very, very squatchy, to use that term. And a lot of people don't like that term, but I find it funny.
It is funny. I went on. What else do you say? I mean, very
It's just,
Bigfooty. Very.
yeah. No, Cliff Berrickman had it right when he said squatchy. I think he was the originator of that term. So.
I think he was too. Cliff seems like a great guy too. I'd love to talk to him someday.
Definitely.
But yeah, the White Mountains are amazing. And I think you're right. People who aren't from this part of the country, I think they underestimate what we have out here for mountain ranges, nature, state forests, and just really heavily wooded areas. Especially when you start getting up into, western Massachusetts, northern Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Those areas are, I mean, it's very rural.
Yeah. People don't get it. They think that New Hampshire, New England is kind of all Boston. It's small states. So there's not a lot there. But I mean, you look at Western Massachusetts. I mean, some of those areas are extremely thick. I mean, you had your encounter there. And I've talked to tons of people that have had stuff out there, and people don't realize that New Hampshire is the second most forested state in the country by percentage of forest, and Maine is number one, which is right next door. That connects to the Canadian province of Quebec, which has millions of acres of woods. And then you've got Vermont, which is heavily wooded. And then you have the Adirondacks of upstate New York, which is, one of the largest
6 million acres.
Yeah. So this stuff is all contiguous. I mean, you can get from these areas with a relatively little human population. New Hampshire and Maine's got a population of less than 1.5 million people, and New Hampshire's about the same for the size of the area. That's not very population dense, and we have tons of wildlife up here. I mean, moose. Maine has the largest amount of moose in the U.S. outside of Alaska. We're talking estimates of 50 to 70,000 moose, 30,000 black bear. I mean, moose are one of the largest animals in North America. So you have habitats that support these gigantic creatures. I get moose here in my yard. I mean, we get bear, bobcat, all kinds of stuff. And I live in a, fairly rural area in New Hampshire, but it's not even as rural as way northern New Hampshire, Coos County, where you have just nothing. I mean, I know there's people up there who own thousands of acres. And it's just woods, and they don't use all that. It's just woods. So people don't understand, that there is that much amount of woods up here, and they underestimate it, and just how rugged the mountains are too. A lot of people think, oh, anything east of the Rockies is not really mountains. Well, New Hampshire definitely could put that to shame. I've been to the Smokies too. There's some very tough areas, and they might beat even Mount Washington in terms of elevation just by a couple hundred feet. These are mountains that are 6,000 plus feet, but Mount Washington and some of these areas up there, I've hiked all 48 of the mountains above 4,000 feet in New Hampshire.
Oh, wow.
And there is some very rugged places where, I mean, a very tragic story, very timely, but tragic, was just this past week. There was a 19-year-old hiker about to turn 20 that went up hiking into the Franconia Range area of New Hampshire and was missing for about 3 days and was found deceased. She had succumbed to the elements. It was a big story because they had tons of search and rescue people looking for her up there. I actually knew the person through a family connection. I never met her, but my family knew of the family. So it was absolutely, very devastating to hear that. But it just goes to show how tricky and how dangerous it is up there. I mean, we have dozens of rescues every year because people, especially from places like Boston and elsewhere, they come up to the mountains thinking, oh, it's 70 degrees in the city. It's going to be great in the mountains. Well, you can get on a mountain that same day. It's 70 degrees in downtown Boston and have it be 30 degrees with wind chill on the top of a 4,000 foot mountain. And, I've seen some very, very bad decisions people have made and underestimating the mountains up there. And I think connecting to the Bigfoot topic, there's a lot more sightings than people would even be aware of in New England, not just New Hampshire, but Maine, Vermont, even into Massachusetts.
Yeah, and we spoke about this a little bit on Doug's show, that there are a lot more sightings than people think, and I think there are a lot more sightings than even most people will know because of the temperature in New England as far as speaking about these things. Like, this is still a very taboo thing. Yes. People around here do not talk about it. They keep it to themselves.
That is one of the biggest things I've dealt with up here. And I've been doing stuff in New Hampshire now and in the New England area since, like I said, 2015, 2016, when I really started interviewing folks around here. And I noticed when I travel to other places, the Pacific Northwest, especially, there's a big cultural Bigfoot kind of thing, even to some extent in places like Florida with the skunk ape, or Ohio, some places like that, Fouke, Arkansas, where you have the Boggy Creek Monster. There's a little bit more of nowadays a cultural acceptance and a willingness to talk about the topics. Whereas up here, it's still very taboo. It's like pulling teeth. I always say that. A lot of the people I've interviewed, they first want to kind of gauge you out, see what you're about, if you're going to exploit them or not. And then they may tell you their story once they feel confident enough, but they usually won't want to have it recorded or anything like that. They'll tell you or something like that, oh, you can write down notes. But I've had some pretty interesting encounters that these people didn't really want anything to do with any kind of publicity with that encounter. So I find that pretty fascinating, why they would make up stories. And another thing I should add is you're not connecting it to Bigfoot. I've talked to a bunch of people who've had sightings 20, 30, 40 years ago, and they thought, oh, well, I saw a monster. I saw some kind of creature, something that one friend described a sighting of a scarecrow-like creature. That's what he kind of described it as. It was just a thing in the woods. They didn't know what to describe it because they thought if they even had any idea about Bigfoot's in the Pacific Northwest. It's not going to be here. Yet what they were describing in a lot of these cases is virtually identical to what somebody in Michigan or somebody in Oregon or Florida would describe in terms of a creature and the behaviors and that sort of thing. So I've always found that really interesting about this region.
Yeah, you mentioned that pretty on Doug's show about that friend who said that scarecrow creature, and that, from what you said, that was literally, if I remember correctly, it was like in the Mohegan Montville area.
Yeah, it was somewhere, I want to say it was probably towards Lyme, Connecticut area, but it was along the Connecticut River, which that whole river kind of valley goes up. And he said back in the day, this was at least in the 90s, he said it was a lot less developed. There was a lot more woods. And there was actually, I think, a Class B report on the BFRO not too far from there of somebody kayaking on the Connecticut River and seeing rocks get thrown at them. And this happened like 20, 30 years ago again, in that same kind of time period. So, it would seem like as habitat shrinks, maybe there's less encounters in those areas. I don't know. I mean, I lived in Connecticut for a little bit, and I got out in the woods, and the places people usually try to go to was either towards the New York border with the Appalachian Trail, that section. There was a guy, Chris Billingsgate. I don't think he really researches anymore. He kind of got out of it, but he had taken some reports from that area. And then another area people talked about was the so-called T area, which is maybe closer to you, which is that area where Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut sort of intersect in a T, and it's that whole corridor down to like the Mohegan area and the casinos. And that sounds like that's the area you're kind of in from what we talked about last time. So that's, that would make sense. Any kind of viable habitat for a sighting. I mean, I have a hard time believing there's large amounts of these creatures if they are in these areas. Even places like the Bridgewater Triangle, that's when we've looked at quite a bit, and I've been down there quite a bit. And, there's a whole host of other crazy things going on in the Bridgewater Triangle from what it seems like. Even just if you discount all the paranormal, all the cryptid stuff, and just look at the human side of things, despicable. I mean, with the supposed cult activity, but the heinous murders. I mean, we interviewed the former Freetown police detective, Alvin Alves, and he had some bone-chilling stories. That was probably the most disturbing interview I've ever done, talking about they'd found a deceased newborn stuffed in a trash can near the woods. I mean, I don't even want to get into that if you don't want to, but it was just like very disturbing in that area. And so, a lot of the Bigfoot sightings that happened in the Bridgewater Triangle were kind of the 60s and the 70s and even into the 80s. That we actually interviewed a guy who had an encounter about 10 or so years ago, I want to say. I don't quote me on that. I don't remember when it was, but they were out in the Freetown State Forest and something threw a rock at them from this cliff. He took us to the spot and said they could hear stomping, whatever it was. I mean, I don't know what it was, but it was something. Maybe it was some crazy people out there, because there are a lot of weirdos out there too. But it seems like a lot of the sightings in that area, Bridgewater Triangle, are, 40, 50 years ago when there was less encroachment, less development, more maybe green belts, corridors for things to move through. But, then again, there's all these other weird things being reported in the Bridgewater Triangle. So whatever it is, if it's, kind of all in our heads and we drum it up, or it's spooky, because you go out there, it's, the Freetown Forest, for example. I mean, we spent a night out there. We spent a couple nights out there this past April. And, it's like any other patch of woods, really. But because it carries such a heavy kind of energy, that just from knowing some of the stories, people, again, probably not the greatest idea to interview the detective who was usually the first on the scene for gruesome murders and things before spending a night in those woods. That was probably not the best move, but usually I'm not afraid out in the woods. I mean, we've been to all across North America, some of the most remote country out there, in some of this terrain. And, it's just usually the biggest threat is usually human beings and being kind of worried about that. So a place like Freetown, Fall River State Forest, that's definitely on your mind. But, all the times I've been in there, we never run into anything weird. So who knows? I mean, it could just be luck of the draw. But that whole southern New England area definitely seems interesting. Again, it's pretty built up now.
Yeah.
But as opposed to like where I'm at and in parts of Maine, literally there's counties in Maine that are considered frontier counties, where there's more moose population than human beings. So, and it's in the same region in New England. So New England has quite a bit of variety, which I don't think people that aren't from around here understand.
Yeah, for sure. It's been built up a lot, man. It's like that Bridgewater Triangle area. I'm very familiar with it, and it is literally surrounded by some of the most densely populated cities and towns. I mean, close, not right next door, but really close.
Yeah, major. I mean, you got Boston on one side.
Yeah,
Providence, that whole area, Rhode Island, and then you got Fall River and New Bedford right next to kind of where that triangle area is. But there's just a long, weird history there with, the colonists there, the Mayflower and Pilgrims and King Philip's War and everything that ensued. A lot of bloodshed on that land there. You got stuff like the Dighton Rock, which, I mean, I don't know how it's just a really weird thing. There's a lot of these very strange things that go on there beyond just, the Bridgewater Triangle is like a catch-all. If you're into anything weird, you'll probably, you throw like a dart on the board, Bridgewater Triangle, you're going to hit something weird. Whether you're into true crime, unsolved serial murder case like the highway murders or the alleged cult activity, the mob killings out there, Pukwudgie cryptids.
I was just going to say that.
Flying creatures, Bigfoot sightings. One of my favorite Bigfoot reports of the creature lifting the car up in the 70s, of a police cruiser lifting it up and dropping it. I mean, that sighting, that story is really fascinating. Lauren Coleman coined the Bridgewater Triangle, who is one of the most prolific cryptozoologists really ever. So much has gone on there. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, Lauren, man. I've read so much stuff from him in the Crypto Mundo thing. That was also his, right? If I'm correct.
Yes. Yeah. Crypto Mundo. He contributed to that as well.
Yeah.
And he's just been around. I mean, the guy really has he coined the term Dover Demon, the Bridgewater Triangle, which is, one of the most famous kind of paranormal entities really ever. With the Bridgewater Triangle. So,
well, let's fast forward a little bit, because you just had a new film come out, and I watched this film multiple times in a day. When you sent me the link for the screener so that I could review it, I was so excited. I'm like, oh yeah, now one more Bigfoot thing to watch, right? Because I love it. I get excited. I want to watch it. And I've watched every single, every Beyond the Trail, every Small Town Monster. I swear to God, I'm not even exaggerating. I watched every single one of them. And
impressive. Yeah. I'm sorry for you.
No, why are you sorry? You shouldn't be sorry.
You see us cook too many times in camp, right? We get that complaint. People are like, less cooking, more action in a video that's like an hour long with 2 minutes of cooking segments. And that's it. Like, oddly specific, but no, that's cool. I appreciate that.
Well, here's one of the things too, that kind of getting to that, people complaining less cooking, more action. One of the things that I really appreciate about what you guys do is that you don't sensationalize anything, right? Integrity is seems to be the most important thing when you're making these films. Meaning, a lot of people will not totally fake things, but they'll try to ramp it up a little bit, make it seem like it's more than it should be. Where you guys, if you go film for 3 days somewhere and you don't get anything, you don't get anything. The film is still good because you're still learning things right along the way. You're still in these areas. You're still getting to see where these creatures are supposed to be and what their habitat is like and all that stuff. And but I think that that's so important because this field already comes with so much ridicule and distrust. And so when you continue to do that, it helps this field in a huge way. And on top of that, getting back to this film, this had some stuff. There was some stuff going on there.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of, I guess, backtrack a little bit. So, Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, for folks that aren't aware, is a documentary series basically following myself, I guess, and my team, sometimes solo, with various Bigfoot investigations around the U.S. So we've been to, I mean, I can't even list off the top of my head the locations anymore.
A lot.
Northern California, Utah, Colorado, Florida, Ohio, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Alaska, Oregon, Washington, West Virginia. There's probably a bunch that I'm missing, but the approach is I always kind of really enjoyed Survivor Man, Les Stroud, and that sort of thing. And a lot of the bushcraft, a lot of the, kind of, I watch a lot of that sort of stuff, and I used to as well. So that's kind of been a big influence. So the idea, and show like Finding Bigfoot, which I enjoyed, again, it kind of got me, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of got me reinterested in Bigfoot after that passion had faded a little bit, with other things going on in life. And the issue is, I know Cliff and Bobo and some of those guys personally, and, I think they're pretty cool, but what they'll always tell you, and they're very open to talk about it, is, when you're on TV, you have your limitations. Like, you're out there in the woods at night, you've got 12 people, they're unionized, they need to do this and they need to do that. You just can't get as authentic of a, Bigfooting experience. And people like Cliff and Bobo and Matt and others, they were Bigfooting long before that show. I mean, you can see those guys doing appearances on shows like in the 90s and other time periods, So they've really got out there. They weren't just playing a part. I think that's some shows people are kind of playing the part of the Bigfooter, whereas these guys, that literally is how they were. But they would always talk about the limitations, with being on TV. And obviously there was the kind of incident where the producers were trying to fake on them and they sort of tried to mutiny and make sure, hey, we're not playing that game, which I think was very commendable. But they will talk about how there are limitations to being on a TV show. So with that in mind, my idea was, well, hey, I love backpacking. I love getting out in the woods. I love going to look for Bigfoot. And I love filmmaking. So these Bigfoot Beyond the Trail is kind of a combination of all three of those things, where the idea is it's just myself or a very small amount of people. We're out in the woods and we're trying our best to elicit contact, find one of these things, film one of these things. But along the way, we like to talk to witnesses, researchers in local areas. I'm not just going to go to Oregon and assume I know everything about the Mount Hood area. No, I want to talk to people that have been working those areas for 20 plus years, like Cliff, or somewhere, West Virginia. I want to talk to Les Odell, guys that really get out there that, I know are hardcore about it. They don't just squash from, their laptop. Not that there's anything wrong with armchair researchers, but, we're getting out in the field. We want to talk to field researchers for sure.
Sure.
So that's kind of the approach. So we always try to, we'll go visit the local museums, stuff like the International Cryptozoology Museum or the Sasquatch Outpost in Colorado, or so many other, kind of local institutions that become hubs. Those kinds of places, people, they're like, hey, there's a Bigfoot museum. Well, I can go share my story there probably without being made fun of. Whereas maybe before, all they could do is post it online, the BFRO or some other database, where now they go share it. So you go talk to the owner of a place like the Sasquatch Outpost or, the International Cryptozoology Museum. They're probably going to have an idea about, well, this is where some recent sightings happened. So we kind of try to combine it all, but we try to show you what it's like really getting out in the field and getting out to some of the most remote parts of North America and what that all entails. So, you'll see us doing that kind of Survivor Man sort of style where we're setting up our tents and doing this kind of stuff. But we're also trying to do the investigating, and just the integrity is the most important thing. There's too many programs now, especially since reality TV became a thing, where it's just so much easier to fake stuff and sensationalize and that sort of thing. And we've found that we don't need to do that to have a following. I mean, I think if anything, we've kind of proven that even this week, with some of the success we've seen with the Alaskan coastal Sasquatch. We didn't need to fake anything to get the kind of metrics that we're getting. It's really, the truth is incredible enough. Yeah. And what's been so cool about being put in this position is a lot of people reach out to me. This story with the Alaskan coastal Sasquatch, which is our latest film, the one that just came out. That one has, all those kind of elements because I was contacted by somebody who owned this property. I get people messaging me all the time about their stories and that sort of thing. So when I go to a place, I'm not just going there randomly. I have sort of a lead. I've got a connection, and that's that kind of networking is really indispensable for the kind of stuff that we do with Bigfoot Beyond the Trail. So it's been super awesome. But we can get into any specifics or anything you want. I just sort of had to go through that spiel, I guess.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. So like I said, I watched this thing multiple times, and if you've never been to Alaska, it is, I mean, it's really the last frontier. When they say that, it's the truth, right? There's no other place like it. Yeah, there's no other place like it on the planet, I don't think, especially not in the United States. It is just so rough, rugged, absolutely magically beautiful. But it's a place where there could be any number of things living in those woods, in those mountains. And it would be the perfect place for a creature like this to exist. And so, watching the movie, it did those things that, as a fan and that kid inside you, it did those things that you wanted to do, right? So you have this amazing environment. First of all, the cinematography was great, right? The shots were just amazing. Some of those shots were just beautiful. And then you're kind of thrust into that environment. And that's the cool thing about these documentaries, is that you're there. That's the whole thing, right? You want to feel like you're there too. And it did such a good job at bringing you along. And then, some of the stuff that happened, like right in the beginning, the very opening scene was the vocals, that audio. And that was some really, really intriguing audio, man.
Yeah. That was some of the stuff that kind of initially hooked me onto that case. So, folks can go check it out, but I'll kind of sum it up. Back in April, May of 2021, I got contacted by this guy who originally is from the New England area as well. So I think that's kind of how we had a little bit of a connection there, but lived up in Alaska, and said, hey, I have this property. We have all this weird stuff going on. And he sent me some of these audio clips, and I was just like, okay, this is really quite something here. Something weird going on. Yeah. He started name dropping people like David Ellis was the one who had discovered a lot of that audio with the Olympic Project. And, I love the Olympic Project. I think they're some of the best researchers out there, far better than I am, and that sort of thing. And I like to consult with a lot of those guys. So that immediately caught my attention. And just, I spoke to him on the phone. He seemed very genuine. Guy was a very serious professional, former member of the military. I don't think he has anything to gain by talking about Bigfoot, but he was genuinely interested in what was going on at this property that he built, that he had no intention of wanting anything to do with Bigfoot. And he won't even tell you it's Bigfoot. He'll say, I'm agnostic about it, that sort of thing. But he was having this weird stuff happen, rocks being thrown, hearing weird growls that sound like T-Rex roars coming towards you, wood knocks, whistles, just all kinds of stuff being thrown hundreds of feet into their boat while it's moored at night in a bay. Just crazy, crazy stuff. So, I talked to him, and he had thrown a lot of his friends and eyewitnesses at me who it's like, hey, you want to talk to this person? This guy's a biologist. He had experiences out there. These people have all been out there. They've had stuff happen. And I'm like, I mean, yeah. And I talked to some of those folks and something was going on. What it is, I don't know, but we've made plans to go out there. One of the things we always are kind of cognizant of whenever we're going out into any area is kind of bringing the viewer with us. So trying to capture those natural areas, because the camera, it doesn't do it justice. I mean, we can try our best and it may look great, but it's one thing to be on location, but we really try to capture the essence of that kind of sense of adventure. And a place like Alaska, I mean, we've been all, like I said, all in different areas of North America, but Alaska is really in a class of its own, just naturally, how it's just so much of it is still unexplored. Our impact there is very minimal.
Mm-hmm.
It's just absolutely crazy. And we've been, like I said, to some of the most remote parts of the lower 48. I mean, there's places in Canada that are kind of similar to Alaska in terms of remoteness, but we've been at the Everglades, the area that's the size of the state of Rhode Island, where it's just woods and trees and water. It's a very creepy feeling. Or the Rocky Mountains, or even northern Maine, where you're driving 3 hours on a bad dirt road in the middle of nowhere, where if you break down, good luck.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, none of it really compares to Alaska. You go up to Alaska and you get that feeling when you're flying over and you just see the nothingness and how long it takes to get anywhere in Alaska. And then you read the statistics. Well, Alaska's got a population of, under 1 million. I think it's like 700 something thousand. And there's literally statistically more caribou than there are human beings in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
You got the brown bears, the grizzly bears, the black bears, the Kodiak brown bears, the gigantic moose up there that are way bigger than the moose even that I have here in New Hampshire. It's just a place that, I mean, it's infinite. Looking at it, it's just crazy. All these mountains, and you see Mount Denali too.
Yeah.
Formerly Mount McKinley. That peak is largest in North America. We got to see it a few times, and it's just there, and you're like, this doesn't look real. So Alaska is just in a class of its own. And that case has been my favorite ever to work on. Not that I don't enjoy any of the other ones. I mean, I've done plenty of extremely fascinating Bigfoot cases, talked to so many witnesses, and there's so many places, and I can't pick which are my favorites. So I love the Rocky Mountains. I love the Pacific Northwest. I love parts of Florida. I love up here in New England. Like, there's so many areas if you asked me to choose, I couldn't choose, but I might choose Alaska. It's like, but just because it's so specific, and it gives you that feeling of, if something were to exist, this would absolutely be probably one of the best places. Not saying other areas couldn't have it. I mean, I think plenty of parts of the United States have Sasquatch activity, have Sasquatches there, but up there, it's like that much more apparent. I mean, it would make sense almost if that's not a stretch. So yeah, Alaska has been the most interesting case to work on. And it's just been such a fun time putting that together. And part 2, I'm working on that currently, and I definitely will send that to you when that's done in the next couple of weeks. But that'll be dropping towards Christmas. So we released the first one on Thanksgiving. The second one will be on Christmas Day. So it'll be sort of a double holiday kind of surprise. And to be honest, one of the primary reasons, I should say, we did it as a 2-parter was because of how much we filmed out there. I mean, we spent 8 days at the cabin. So we filmed over 1 terabyte of footage.
Holy cow.
4K footage. So we filled up an entire hard drive, This is like, right here is the Alaska hard drive. I've got 5 terabytes on here. And I literally had to buy this one because of the amount of stuff. So over 1 terabyte now, once you start editing as well. But just from everything we'd filmed up there, that was just at the cabin. We had also filmed, I think, almost 600 gigs in our second week in Alaska. We did another sort of Alaska adventure, more in interior Alaska. But again, the reason why we chose to do 2 parts is because of the way that the story worked, in terms of I had to kind of introduce the case at first. And then I wanted to break it down day by day, because every day we did something different while we were out there. When you're out in a place like that, where you have no cell phone service, technology. Yeah, we had like our computers and stuff, but that was really only for transferring footage. Like, we weren't sitting around the cabin on our computers all day. It was like, we barely did that. Only satellite connection. So we'd have to drive out a little bit on the boat or find a high place to call with the satellite phone. So your priorities are so different. You're not worried about, well, I got to go to the bank today, or I got to do this, I got to do that. Your life becomes your immediate survival and your immediate activities. Oh, what are we going to eat today? What are we going to hike today? What are we going to go do? Where are we going to investigate today? That's it for like a week. Even some of our Bigfoot investigations that are less than a week, you're driving around. You have to kind of go from location to location. If the weather's too brutal, you got to get out, go back to town, whatever. This was just so much simpler, pure. You're just doing exactly what our ancestors, I guess, would have been doing if they're one location sort of thing. So I wanted that to reflect in the film, how it was sort of that linear kind of sense where it was day to day. And then the second part, so part 2 of the Alaskan Coastal Sasquatch, will pick up where part 1 left off, and just continue in that sort of linear fashion. And then as there was an introduction, there will also be, kind of conclusion to that, but it will be sort of open-ended as well.
Yeah, I'm excited for part 2, because I felt like, part 1 ended. I didn't want it to end. I wanted it to continue going, especially knowing that it was part 1 and there was another part coming.
It would have been like 3 hours or three and a half, 4 hours if it was all one piece. I got to say that.
That's all right, man. I mean, there's movies that are 3 and a half, 4 hours. I know people would have watched
it, but we felt, because the second part definitely will also be, it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be in an hour and a half. We'll see. It's going to be over an hour a little bit, but so I think together, you watch them back to back, that'll kind of make the most sense. But a lot of people obviously seen the first part, so they're eagerly awaiting. That's our most commonly asked question, is when is part 2? Mm-hmm. Soon, I promise.
Yeah, it's such a great film, man, and not like the others weren't, because there were so many that I truly enjoyed watching, and again, others that I watched, a couple times because I really liked them, but this was my favorite by far, and I'm sure that's probably been the sentiment for a lot of people.
Yeah, we've had, tons of people say this is their favorite one so far. It's been my favorite to work on. I think just the timing of it everything was kind of full circle, because when I first came in touch with, the property owner there, it was like before we really even started doing a lot of Beyond the Trails. There was a few out, and we'd been working on a few, and then it was literally a year later that we were going out to the cabin after I came in contact with the property owner. So it was like a full circle kind of thing. And then I've been kind of sitting on it now for a while because, we were sort of planning to do it sort of towards the end of the year. And then Seth Breedlove of Small Town Monsters, as well, is doing a film called On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Last Frontier, which is coming probably in January at this point. We're not sure yet. That's more like a traditional film release from STM, where it's going to be coming out on like Amazon and all the streaming sites, and you can get the DVD and that sort of thing. And we kind of like to do, when we have these big product shoots like this, where we're in Alaska, we did this with the Pacific Northwest, where we'll have a Beyond the Trail that kind of corresponds with Seth's On the Trail of Bigfoot movie, where they sort of interact with each other. You'll hear them both kind of mentioned, and that sort of thing, but you can watch them separately, but if you watch them together, ultimately you're just going to benefit more if you're interested in that kind of thing. But his film will be like the most expansive film on the Bigfoot topic ever done with Alaska, in my opinion. Just the breadth of interviews. They focus a lot on interviewing folks. So whereas we're more boots on the ground, investigative, we're taking you to this location, they just interviewed dozens of people. There was tons of Alaskan Native Americans that they talked to, probably the most that's ever been in like a Bigfoot related program about Alaska. And their perspectives are obviously so interesting.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to the baby crying phenomena thing too, there's like a whole connection with that independently was going on with what we were doing and with what Seth was doing. We didn't really have any clue until later. And what I mean by that is, in the Alaskan Coastal Sasquatch, you can hear this baby crying audio, mm-hmm. which the property owner claims was recorded there when only women were ever present. The only times it's ever been heard is when women are present, which very creepy, right?
Yeah.
And you could say, well, yeah, maybe it's another animal. I've heard everything from it was a fox or a porcupine's crying, that sort of thing. And I've listened to everything, and nothing that I hear is close to it. I could be wrong. Somebody, please, if you're able to get to the bottom of that, would love to know. But it's just, why wouldn't they hear this sound any other time? And they've recorded hundreds of hours of audio out there on this property in the 4 years that they've been going out there. The only times they ever get the baby crying is when women are there. And it's so strange because the Tlingit people and other Alaskan, especially in the coastal regions, like in the southeast Alaska, Kenai Peninsula area, where this was the Kenai Peninsula. The natives talk about the Kushtaka, or the otter man, which they describe as this hairy humanoid-like creature that swims from in between bays and channels. What does that sound like? I kind of was thinking to myself, well, that sounds a lot like maybe Sasquatch is being seen swimming, because there are reports of Bigfoot seen swimming, especially in British Columbia, Southeast Alaska. That terrain is extremely similar to the Kenai Peninsula. It's like that temperate rainforest where you've got these channels in the oceans where moose and bear, mountain lions, other things have been seen swimming very wide channels, and they'll swim from island to island looking for food. Sasquatches apparently have been seen doing the same thing. So, maybe these natives were seeing this and thinking, oh, it's the otter man. That just kind of makes sense. You've got river otters and sea otters in a lot of these areas. And, they described it as, for whatever reason, emitting a baby crying sound to lure women into the woods for whatever reason. So again, Scott, the property owner had recorded that very sound when women have been present. And then Seth and those guys are interviewing some, Alaska First Nations people, and they talk about, hearing baby crying sounds, and that's part of their kind of cultural folklore. So, and the property owner is not Native American, doesn't have any connection to those cultures. He just happens to have bought a property in the Kenai Peninsula, right? So I just find that a really fascinating connection. That something tangible might be going on. So we really hope to expound upon that. But hey there. Oh, that's awesome, Brian. Yeah, Brian, I remember getting in contact with him, must have been like 2 years ago, almost at this point in the winter or so, about his encounter up in New Hampshire. And obviously I was super curious because I have a whole database of New Hampshire sightings. So I talked to Brian, and that's how I kind of became friends with him. And then we went hiking and got to take him hiking to some of my favorite spots in the White Mountains. And then we've been out in the field a few times, and even in the Bridgewater Triangle too. He's kind of down in that area. So he's had some friends who have seen apparitions in the Freetown Forest and that sort of thing. So awesome.
Yeah, he when I started the channel, he came on a little bit like after the beginning, maybe a few videos in or whatever, and we spoke a little bit, in the chat, and he mentioned that he was friends with you, and I said, "Oh, well, I'm actually gonna attempt to see if he'll come on the show," and then we talked a little bit more. But yeah, he's a nice guy, very nice guy.
I gotta say, hardcore. He's like more hardcore than I am when it gets to going in the White Mountains. The guy is constantly hiking up there. I'm not in the White Mountains a lot anymore, unfortunately, as I used to be, but he is always up there. So I always look forward to his videos, him and his buddy Chewy, who's awesome, hiking around and getting up there in my old stomping grounds. Excuse me.
Yeah. I've watched some of the videos. He's definitely savage. So you earlier you were talking about how it would be very difficult for you to pick your favorite of all the places you've been. But so if you can't pick a place, is there any specific event or investigation or piece of evidence along the way that you would say sticks out the most to you, that you think about still?
That's probably just as tough as the location one, honestly. Because we've had these weird experiences out there, and none of them I haven't seen a Sasquatch, so I can't say that they were Sasquatch 100%, of course, and I never like to allude that's the case. But, the things that we theorize fit sort of reported Sasquatch behavior, so stuff like the rock throwing and the whoops and the wood knocks, stuff like that has been reported all over the continent, really, between the United States and Canada and some of those wilderness areas. We've experienced some of that stuff. But I mean, this Alaska case aside, which, we had some pretty interesting stuff happen there that I think about all the time. I mean, also I'm thinking about it now because I'm editing that. But gosh, I mean, if I had to pick, I guess I'm just going to go for a random one. But going to Bluff Creek, I think, was pretty special. Some of the events we had happen there, because they were like this weird sequence of event kind of thing. So we went there in July of 2021. And I was with Eli, who's often on my crew, and Tate Hieronymus as well. No relation to Bob Hieronymus, although it's kind of like the most
really weird though.
Yeah, it's like the spelling's different actually, but we always kind of bust his chops for it all the time, troll him about it. But those two guys, Tate is part of the Bluff Creek project, and those guys actually rediscovered the Patterson-Gimlin film site, which had been lost for a while in Northern California, which is where the term Bigfoot came from.
Yep.
And Brown Dwarf, I know, I've never met him personally, but all my buddies, Tate and Jonathan Easley and Ron Reed, they all know him and have been out to Bluff Creek with him. So I see him going whoop whoop Bluff Creek. Hopefully we'll meet you out there at some point. But
man, I didn't know that. Brown Dwarf.
Yeah.
The secrets.
So it's just that area is really cool. I mean, we went out there and there was just this like really weird kind of sequence of events, everything that happened. The first night we're driving into this place called Louse Camp, which was basically founded in the late 50s when there were folks logging out there. So essentially the redwoods had been depleted. There's a very small percentage of the original redwoods left. Actually, my shirt is from Humboldt County, California's Redwood Coast. I just noticed that. But they had depleted the redwoods, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, which was a shame. I mean, those trees are some of the most magnificent things on earth.
They sure are.
And so they started looking more inland because there was this untapped wilderness just out from the coast in California, Northern California, and south of Oregon. And there was a lot of potential there, these huge Douglas fir trees. So they went in there logging, and that's where some of the original Bigfoot stuff happened. That the term was coined Bigfoot. And then the decade between then and 1967 with the Patterson-Gimlin film, there was just a lot of activity, a lot of history in that area. So to this day, it's still extremely remote, but we're driving in there and, we had this like kind of interesting mystery rock slide happen that was seemingly coincidental. And then something in the creek beneath us runs away as we're distracted. That was weird. But one of our last nights there, we heard, and that was the first time I'd actually heard kind of like that clearly a whoop. I'd heard them on recordings before that had kind of happened around while we were sleeping or doing something else. But we were actually being shown the area where the original Bigfoot prints were found. So the prints that coined the name Bigfoot, not the first ever prints, but where Jerry Cruz and those guys that were logging in Louse Camp and in that area were documenting these tracks and seeing their 50-gallon barrels kind of thrown into the creek.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this area, and my buddy Ron Reed, his dog named Bandit, was with us, and Bandit never has to be leashed. Very mild-tempered dog, awesome dog. Has hiked the whole Appalachian Trail, like hardcore dog, done a lot more wilderness stuff than most people. And Ron is, he's in the Alaska video. He's a great guy. And the dog just kind of starts diving into the woods for whatever reason. And there's like a group of us. There's maybe 10, 15 of us, probably less than 15, maybe about 10 or so. And a couple guys in the rear are saying they're hearing like possible knocks or weird noises in the woods. And this dog Bandit is ducking into the side of the bushes, which made no sense. And Ron says, well, he only ever does that if he's really scared, maybe like because of fireworks or something. And so he's trying to call him back. He just keeps trying to duck and hide. So we literally had to take our buddy's belt and make a leash for Bandit and Ron's like, I never have to leash Bandit. We didn't know what is wrong with his dog. Tail between his legs. I've never seen a dog with the tail as flat as that. I mean, it's like this dog always has his tail wagging. He'll walk by and smack you with it a little bit, as dogs do. And this was just, it was weird. And, he's an older dog, so Ron's thinking maybe there's something wrong. We take him back to camp. He's fine. Then his tail's wagging. This is maybe 20 minutes later. And I happen to be filming on my Sony Handycam, and I walk up to Bandit just to pet him. And I'm like, oh, hey, Bandit, look, he's okay. And I hear just this very clear whoop. And I look and I immediately turn the camera. I'm like, oh, is that Ken? I thought it was Ken Gearhart because Ken Gearhart and a bunch of these guys were in camp. There was the Bluff Creek Project kind of annual gathering. Everyone's around the campfire. Everyone's talking. I was literally the only person that heard it because I was on the edge of camp with Bandit. Like Eli and a couple people were right next to me. They didn't hear it at all, which was super weird. And the camera picked it up really well. And so I thought that was really weird. And I asked Rowdy Kelly, member of the Bluff Creek Project, and some of the guys that worked on the film Willow Creek, which was filmed right there in Louse Camp, the Bobcat Goldthwait movie.
Yep.
They were doing the whoops and stuff while the guy was in the tent getting terrorized. I'm asking them, like, did you guys do this? Was it anyone's dog? No one seemed to know this sound. And then looking at it afterwards, Chris Spencer of the Olympic Project checked it out and thought it was really interesting, very intriguing that it happened at that time. that was a really weird kind of sequence of events. Can I say that was Bigfoot? I mean, no, but it's interesting that it kind of fits purported behavior. So I thought that was really kind of cool. And just the whole setting of being at Bluff Creek. What an age, beautiful. So, that's not my favorite, I'll say that, but that is just one of the ones, if I had to pick one, aside from the Alaska stuff, which is definitely up there. But yeah, so that's in our Bigfoot at Bluff Creek episode. And that whole trip was just wild. And when we ended up going out to research a property in Willow Creek with James Bobo Fay, and it's happened spontaneously. And just, it's just like a whole crazy sequence of events. But yeah. So that's probably one of my favorites, but there are plenty. I mean, I could tell you about being in the Everglades or, being in New Hampshire or wherever. And there's lots of other interesting stuff.
The Bluff Creek thing, though, I think for anybody who's part of the Bigfoot community is like, is kind of like going to Mecca, right?
Yeah, it very much is like pilgrimage. Yep.
Yeah, it's a pilgrimage, and it's almost spiritual, right? To get to go there and to be at this place where still to this day, we're almost in 2023, right?
Yep.
You think about how long it's been since this was filmed, and it is still the predominant piece of video footage that people go to when you want to say, hey, you know about Bigfoot? No, I don't know about Bigfoot. Well, here, look at this, right?
Everyone's seen it. Yeah.
This is what you go to. It's also still the one, I think, that is the most credible. And all these years later, and was filmed on this old camera. I wonder sometimes if maybe we should start integrating old cameras into our field work.
I've thought about that.
Right? I mean,
very much so. Yeah. You're right. And going there, I'd always had an opinion about the Patterson Gimlin film. Some days I thought it was real. Some days I was more skeptical. I'm still not 100%. I do lean more towards it being real, especially after past couple of years, seeing some of the enhancements that were done with Isaac Tian and Bill Munns and Jeff Meldrum, and talking about it and seeing like jiggle movement and stuff that just would be so hard to pull off nowadays.
Yeah.
Let alone back then. But going there actually changed my opinion on the film a little bit, because I saw how rugged that country still is to this day. I mean, back then, it was rugged, and it was one of the last places in the lower 48 that was kind of tapped into in terms of rugged land. And now it's like millions of acres of protected national forest land. You've got the Six Rivers National Forest, Trinity National Forest, just so many different national forests all connecting in this region. And absolutely amazing, how much space there is out there. And going out there, seeing how remote it was, made me think, why would these guys, I understand the region was, inundated with Bigfoot sightings and footprint finds, that sort of thing, but why would they choose to go to this location of all places to film this film? They could have done it an hour closer to town, just pulled off somewhere in the side of the road, hiked, even half a mile, less than that, into the woods, and filmed something very similar. Why did they pick an area that was extremely tough to get into to film this? I mean, that's what I wonder to this day. And we camped right where Patty walked. We literally slept in that very spot where that frame was. And we were there that night, and, we put up a pheromone chip, and, we're kind of in this area that they have cameras in, that they get mountain lions and tons of bear, elk, all kinds of stuff walking through there. And you kind of feel the history, and it's a place that you've read about in books since you were younger and that sort of thing. So it has a special feeling. And I understand why Tate and some of my other friends that are, kind of very fond of the Bluff Creek region, why they gravitate and try to go there at least once a year, because it's just, you get that feeling. And I'll never forget, there was just one evening, and it's in the film, but it was a kind of spontaneous moment. We went up this side road that goes up towards Onion Mountain, where there's been tracks that have been found. We're flying the drone. We're sitting on this dirt road that if you were to drive your car off it, you're done. Good luck. You're just down in the trees, down a cliff. We're sitting there on the edge of this thing, and I'm just flying my drone, and I got this shot where I'm looking at us, and I'm just flying it back and pulling it up as it's going. And, there's the hill behind us opens up. And then you get past that, and there's another row of mountains, and there's another row of mountains. There's 10 rows of mountains as far as the eye can see, and just green everywhere. And we're sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, like, imagine those guys that came here in the late 50s and the 60s, they thought they would be the ones to solve Bigfoot. They thought, within a couple months, we will have wrapped up this mystery. And here we were 60 years later, still looking for the same thing. I mean, it's just that area is special for sure. I really want to get back there. And again, for my buddies that get out there all the time or every year, I'm very envious, but obviously we go to a lot of other places too, but I'd love to get back to the Bluff Creek region. It's just special. And then the stuff we had happen was weird. Again, can I say it's Bigfoot? No, but a lot of times people go there and they don't have anything unusual happen. We had like a whole host of stuff. Eli had this dream, which was really weird. We're sleeping in the tent at night and all of a sudden he's just screaming and thrashing. I thought he was either having a seizure or a heart attack. I didn't know what to do. And you're woken up at 3 a.m, like someone next to you is flailing in their tent. And you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're like 2.5, 3 hours from maybe the nearest hospital, which is on coastal California. I'm like, what is going on with this guy? He calms down. Next morning, he's like, yeah, I had this dream. I was sleeping next to the creek, and this wolf or a coyote just came up and just like bit my arm and started fighting with me. And it kind of became a funny thing, right? And then we're talking to Jamie Wayne of the Bigfoot of the Bluff Creek Project, tell him this story because we kind of been sharing the story, and he just he didn't laugh or anything. He's just like, oh, it's really interesting you would say that. And we're like, okay. And he says, well, this was Yurok tribal hunting lands, and the Yurok said, if you saw a wolf in your dreams, it meant that you were not welcome here, or you had a vision of a wolf or something. And it's like, well, okay,
whoa. I'm
glad we're leaving tomorrow, so it's just like really, that was kind of interesting. So yeah, again, that Bluff Creek area, very, very special. We spent like 5-6 days in there, and that was probably one of my favorites, like I said. Yeah, as Brian says, Eli can sleep like a log. We got a funny tent story with Eli from the New Hampshire Beyond the Trail trip. Yeah, the guy sleeps like a log. So when he freaked out, that's when I was really like, what is going on? What the heck? But that was a good one. Yeah, there were many good ones. We have so many great stories of all the places we've been to, and some of the amazing people we've talked to. Again, talking to the local researchers and folks that are boots on the ground in those areas, and just the difference in terrain. I mean, you're going from flat, marshy, almost jungle-like environments in Florida to rugged places like the Rocky Mountains, and then temperate rainforests in the Pacific Northwest or Alaska, all the kind of Appalachian areas, the Smoky Mountains, extremely humid, also jungle-like. But
yeah,
a lot of different places, and you end up picking up a lot of these kinds of stories. I could probably go on all night. So
it's I mean, you have to feel just so like you have to feel so lucky, right? I mean, just to be able to do this, to be in this field, and to have that. I always refer back to that kid in you who, when you first saw that Yeti and your dad told you that story and you read that scroll and you're looking in the mountains, and that your imagination is just going like, oh my gosh, how cool would this be if it's real? So when you're growing up and you're seeing these people doing these things, going to these places with so much history and lore,
right.
And then to be able to do it yourself, I mean, that has got to be just one of the coolest things ever, man.
Super thankful for it all the time. I mean, I could spend an eternity just here in New Hampshire or New England looking into these stories, as I did before. We started going around, and it's always got a special place in my heart, of course, because I know a lot of the local stories, and I know these areas, and encounters like Brian's. Those are very fascinating to me. But then you get to go to all these other places. A place like Alaska. So it's tough to pick and choose some of those, and you have to figure out where you want to go back to. If we've had something interesting happen, like on this recent Kentucky trip we went on. But I actually have a few things I want to show you real quick.
Yeah.
They happen to be over there, so I have to leave the screen for a second.
Yeah.
Let me grab one thing.
Absolutely. When the Chuck Norris of Bigfooting says he's got to get up, you don't tell him no. You let him do what he's got to do. I'm excited to see what he's got. How many people bet it's nunchucks? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Okay, because we were talking about Bluff Creek, I just remembered I happen to have this track out. So this is really cool. This is a Patterson Gimlin film site cast. This is an actual copy of an original cast. So this is what they call a sand copy, and you can see it's got all this kind of sand. I'm trying not to spill it on my computer because sand literally will come off of it. What they did was they took the original Patterson cast and they would put it in sand and then cast it right on the spot. And this happens to be an actual original from the Patterson Gimlin. So this would be, basically first generation copy because it's coming from the original.
Look at how big that is, man.
So it had a crack, unfortunately, but put it right here. I don't know if I have a tape measure here, but
so cool.
It was given to me by a friend named John Horrigan, who used to research Bigfoot and all kinds of cryptid UFO topics. Great guy. He was in our Bridgewater Triangle episode, actually, originally from Massachusetts, but he used to spend time in the Pacific Northwest with, he met Peter Byrne, John Green, all the original guys that first got on the scene. He was all over the place. And he gave me his whole collection of casts, and this was one of them that happened to come with it. And, this one's obviously a very treasured one. So it's super thin. You can see that. So I really got to be careful with it when I'm putting it down. That's one thing I wanted to show. The other thing I wanted to show was this guy right here. For folks that have seen the Alaska episode, they might understand what this is. So these are, as Rob Roy Menzies would call them, the rock that Squatches prefer. So what this is just a rock covered in a plastic net, as you can see. And these litter the beaches and the shores of coastal Alaska, especially in the area we were in, the property. And they're literally buried in the moss from decades ago. Fishermen would use these stones because they were cheaper than lead or metal, put them in a net and use them to hang their nets in the water, right? A bigger net, you would attach like a dozen or however many to these to a net so you could get fish, because the fish runs out there incredible. But these are the very rocks that they found that were thrown into well, not this exact rock, but, this type of rock they'd find thrown into their boat from the shoreline all the way into their boat as they're moored at night while they were building up the property. This is the kind of stuff they would hear, like a loud clunk, or they'd hear a noise, and then they'd be driving back and they'd do cleanup of the boat and they'd find one of these just laying, somewhere in the boat. It's like,
so weird.
What the heck? And then this was also the kind of rock that they found on the rusty chair that was just placed there, randomly. Nobody knows who put it there, and again, these are all over the shores everywhere. So, I mean, I grabbed a couple and I kept this one. And again, the rocks that Squatches prefer, they're just everywhere. And it's just an old resource that people don't use anymore. And I was actually showing this the other night on a show, and I figured I'd bring it out now because people might understand what it is that have seen that. And if not, you'll get it if you go see it. But it's definitely a cool souvenir for sure.
It is very cool. And watching the movie and seeing how many, I mean, they were just literally buried.
Piles. I mean, I pulled this out of a pile and I took a few of them because I actually gave them out as like souvenirs to friends and stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're just everywhere. And it's just
I'll give you my shipping address.
For sure. I mean, maybe I'll just fill up a whole suitcase with them next time. No, it'll be that obvious, but I will smuggle a few.
We got a few questions in the chat that I want people to be able to get to ask you. So let me go back and find the couple that I saw before. Let's see. What did you think your encounter in West Virginia was when you were there, Alex?
It's a good question. I don't know if we really had an encounter. Oh, okay, yeah, I think I know what they're talking about. So when we were in the Monongahela National Forest,
such a fun name, by the way.
Yeah, they got some. I have to say that Appalachia, I love down there. It's not Appalachia. They'll get really pissed if you say it that way. We say Appalachia up here because we're in the northern Appalachians, but down there, I love Appalachia. Kentucky. West Virginia, those areas, North Carolina, Tennessee, great people down there. Really warm. Love the culture. The stories are incredible. I mean, the Bigfoot stories are out of this world down there. But we were in West Virginia, and we're in this area, and was it a Bigfoot encounter? I don't think so. I don't know what it was. It was probably deer, but there was just one point where I'm with Eli and our buddy Jonathan Dodd, who does some of the artwork. super talented. If you guys haven't seen his artwork before, he's done some of my favorite Bigfoot depictions. He did a really cool one. I was actually trying to find it about the Bigfoot lifting the car on the Bridgewater Triangle kind of encounter. So we're with him, and they had, I think one of them had a thermal unit. I had a pulsar thermal unit, and Eli had like a Psionics night vision or something like that. And he was kind of filming us. And I had my pulsar, for whatever reason, the hand strap just kind of like let loose, and the whole thing dropped to the ground. And it's like not a cheap thermal unit. So I'm like, oh crap. And as soon as that happened, basically like I'm going down to get it, and we just hear this like snap in the woods, like something reacted to that moment. So we saw a bunch of deer that night. Could it have been a deer? Yeah, maybe, very likely. But if that's what they're referring to, I don't know. I mean, we talked to Les and a couple other people. We found this weird stone stack structure in the middle of the woods out there for whatever reason, in an area where Les had gotten roared at before when he was camping. And he said all of a sudden they just heard this like crazy roar. So that's why we chose that area. And there's a bunch of other reports. There's one report from that area that Les had told us of, lady seeing, Bigfoot cross the road, and she said it had like a big gut, like a big stomach, and she described it as like the Black Grinch. It's like the description. So that kind of sticks to your mind. That area, it's like outside it's near Davis, West Virginia. So it's like the northern part. There's a lot of reports in the area all throughout there. And we went down in the caves, and the caves they have down there are incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I was in Mammoth Caves, Kentucky.
Crazy.
It's like a Grand Canyon, but underground. It's crazy. But Appalachia is really cool. So I don't know if they're referring to that encounter, but that's like the only thing. But I wouldn't even consider that like really an encounter. Yeah, Jonathan Dodd, man, I really wish I had that piece of art, because I will find that, and I will like post it in a little bit, and just so you can pull it up if I can find that. Well, we can roll on with the questions until I'm able to locate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, speaking of a piece of art, I'm going to show you something. Has nothing to do with your video or your film, but I have a really good buddy. Okay, I've spoken about some of my hardships on this channel in the past, and when I was trying to get sober, he was my counselor twice, and then he was my case manager. Then he was my case manager twice. So when I went to the first place I went to, he worked there. When I went to the second place I went to, he worked there. It was like he followed me, and he was incredible. I mean, he just did so much to help me. There's nothing I could say that could thank him enough. He was an integral part of me getting sober. Matter of fact, I'm going to get emotional. The 8th of December is 9 years for me. It's a pretty
Congrats.
big deal. But so he was so good at his job, but he quit. He said he couldn't do it anymore just because it's a very difficult job to do. If you can imagine, it's very hard.
A lot of struggling, yeah.
Yeah, you lose so many people because of the nature of the disease.
It's going to take a toll.
Yeah. So he decided to really chase his dream, which was to be an artist. And when we reconnected like a couple of years ago through Facebook, and we started talking, and now years on, like we're friends. We're good friends, and he's just a wonderful guy. The picture that's in the background here is his picture. He made that picture.
Awesome.
And so there's a series of these pictures, and it's the series of the Faceless Wanderer. And there's a story behind it. The story is this guy felt like he had this anomaly. He felt like he wasn't being seen. He wasn't a part of society. People didn't see him. And because of that, he had lost his face, basically. And so now he is kind of a cryptid of his own. And he's out on this odyssey to find other people or other cryptids that he can relate to. Weird, because we never spoke about any cryptid stuff ever. And
he wasn't aware of your encounter or anything?
Never. Nothing. And so then we connect, we talk, and I tell him about the show, and he's like, holy cow, like, you're not going to believe this. And he tells me about this, and he shows me the picture that's behind you. Well, then a couple days ago, or about a week ago, he shows me another picture, and I was like, "Oh my God, I love it! It's so cool." And so he messages me and he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna send you a Christmas card. What's your address?" So I was like, "Oh, all right." I'm like, "You're sending Christmas cards out, really?" and a package comes, and I thought it was for somebody else because I looked at the package and I'm like, I didn't order anything from Keepsake. Well, anyway, this is what came. I hope you can see it.
Oh, that's so cool.
It is legit. The Faceless Wanderer, and that is no lie, Harry from Harry and the
That's
Hendersons.
so cool. Yeah, it's like a little snow scene too. I love it.
Yeah. So this is what he sent me. So anyway, I had to
That's
show that.
super cool.
His name is Jared Veens. I will put his stuff in the chat actually because he's such a talented artist. He's working on everything for me. This is not going to be the final Encrypted Connections logo. Although I do love it, I'm probably going to make this a T-shirt at some point. He's working on what we both kind of thought the logo should look like, and it's going to be incredible when it's done. I mean,
I think it's a cool name, Encrypted Connections. I remember the first time when you told me about it, I kind of like encrypted. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
Encrypted Connections. They're like, it took me a minute, but
Little play on words.
yeah, no, it's cool.
Thank you, but yeah, I had to show that he's an amazing guy, and so I hope when I put that stuff in the thing, go follow him. Did you just put something up? What's that?
Yeah, if you do hit share screen, that's my screen. That's the art, the Jonathan Dodd stuff. So
Wow,
that's probably one of my favorite Bigfoot depictions ever done. I mean, I kid you not. I've seen them all, but the story behind this is essentially this is like a true story. I mean, we talked to actually John Horrigan, who gave me that Patty track. He actually had spoken to, I believe, somebody related to, or like one of the guys who knew the cop, and then a buddy of mine named Paul Eno. Okay, buddy, calm down. Braxy, the cryptid cat. He's gonna jump over here.
That's a cat that I just heard.
Yeah, he just ran by. He just jumped up. Oh no. Tried to jump. We have this mattress up here because I'm still working on stuff. Braxy, come here. He ran away. I think he's in hyper mode, but he was actually named after Braxy, the Braxton County monster, the Flatwoods Monster.
Oh, awesome!
Because we adopted him from the Flatwoods Monster Museum in Sutton, West Virginia. So another Appalachian connection with me. We drove him all the way up to New Hampshire from West Virginia. But
that's so cool.
Anyway, back to this story. So my buddy Paul Eno, who has a show called Beyond the Paranormal, he's down in Rhode Island, Woonsocket area. Great guy. He's been literally in the paranormal for like 50 plus years. I mean, he started with Ed and Lorraine Warren. He's done a lot of crazy stuff. He's somebody you should talk to. He's done everything under the sun. Ufology, parallel worlds, a lot of stuff I'm not really into. He's just like all over it. Started with Ed and Lorraine Warren, just like knows a lot of people. Poltergeist case in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He worked on that, like one of the first poltergeist case ever. But he actually had spoken to the police officer this happened to and said, yeah, he confirmed it, that like this guy, or the story was, I think it was West Bridgewater. There was this kind of a rash of sightings of Bigfoot-like creatures in this area. And this was in the late 60s, early 70s, I believe, or was it early 60s? One of those time periods. We'll just say the 60s. And there was just a rash of sightings. And this woman lived at the edge of kind of the Hockomock Swamp and, was saying she was seeing like a weird bear creature in the woods. So they sent a cruiser out there. Guy's on patrol. He's just sitting there at the end of the road, back to the woods. And he says something just starts lifting the back of his cruiser. And he sees basically kind of like this photo, like, and this is another John Dodd art of this like hairy torso, just like hair in the back, lifting the cruiser and then just dropping it. And then he ended up speeding off. And this is another depiction of that.
Wow.
But like going back to that first one, just how cool it looks. I mean, even a black bear being seen in that area, I don't know how it would manage to lift like a big police cruiser, especially back then.
Way.
Cars were way heavier then.
Yeah.
So it was, and then Aaron Cadieux, who directed the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, we interviewed him too for this film. We were down there in April doing the Bridgewater Triangle Bigfoot kind of thing. And he says that when they were premiering their film, a lady came up to in the premiere and said, that was my dad, who was the cop who had the cruiser lifted. She said that was not a fake story. That really happened to him. You know, he claimed that this weird creature lifted the back of the cruiser and dropped it. You know, and it's just like, and Lauren Coleman was one of the first to speak to him as well. That he was really working the Bridgewater Triangle case back then. So I just wanted to share that because it's one of my favorite pieces of Bigfoot art. I'm gonna probably get a print of this or something and put it up on the wall because it's just, you know, everyone, you see like the Patty pose in a lot of different Bigfoot art, and that's cool. But just knowing the backstory behind this too, I thought was really neat. So
Yeah, this is very cool. Can you imagine you're sitting there in your cruiser, right? You're a cop, so you feel like you're probably more safe than most people, and all of a sudden, the back of your mostly steel car back then, right?
yes, yeah, oh yeah,
These things were tanks. They were
like a
tanks.
Lincoln or Cadillac,
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, yeah, you're talking like a hefty vehicle.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the thing lifts off the ground. You look in the rearview mirror, and all you see is a giant hairy chest. That's all you see, lit up with your brake lights.
I mean, it just eliminates almost anything else that could possibly be because
Yeah.
there are people who can lift cars. I mean, I've seen that done. You know, there's like extreme contests, but what are the chances that guy who, like, one of however many thousands of people that can actually lift a car is there wearing a hairy costume in the night pranking a cop? I mean, again, a black bear, I don't think could do this. Black bear, especially in that area of Massachusetts, they don't get that big.
No, 200 pounds, 250 pounds.
Even a moose, I don't think could really do this. I mean, that would be a lot of neck strain to be able to lift
Right.
something as heavy as a cruiser. So what could possibly do that? I mean, we know that gorillas and other primates, like chimps and gorillas, it's scary how strong they are compared to humans. Like a chimpanzee, it's maybe only 3-4 feet tall, probably kick like 5 dudes, you know, in a fight, like kick their butts, you know, like adult males.
It'd probably kill them all.
Oh yeah, rip their faces off and eat them. I mean, and let alone a gorilla, which is just a powerhouse. Their muscle is so much denser than human, so you can only imagine something like a Sasquatch, how powerful it would be. And I mean, a lot of the reports have a lot of really crazy tree things going on. You know, these gigantic rocks being thrown. And thank you, Cashew, for posting the link to that documentary where we kind of talk a little bit more about this particular encounter. This is what that art was made for. But I just think it's so fantastic. But it really just gets the mind wondering. And, you know, it goes back to my thing I was talking about earlier about, you know, a lot of those sightings in the Bridgewater Triangle area, especially the Hockomock Swamp, happened, you know, in that time period. There's been a lot less Bigfoot sightings in recent years down in that area than there was back then. And this was just, again, one of my favorite encounters stories. I mean, there's a lot of other ones I like, but this was just, the depiction was super cool.
Yeah, it's really cool, man.
I mean, just to even pull that off as a prank, again, if it was a person doing that, the lengths you would have to go to, and you pranking a cop that way, I mean, seems pretty stupid to me.
Yeah, you'd be risking your life, number one, because the cop potentially pull his gun out and just start firing.
Totally justified, you know, to kill you right there on the spot.
But these guys who lift cars, they're not lifting these cars. They're lifting, you know, Toyota Priuses and Honda Leafs. Like, you know what I'm saying? These things are made out of plastic, and they're small.
Yeah, but I love the way Jonathan made this thing look, and just the face. I mean, it's just like super kind of creepy, cool looking. You know, just the size of it. So
yeah,
but anyway,
it's very cool. Yeah,
I love about that earlier.
I love. I am a huge I'm a huge fan of Bigfoot art. But like you say, so much of it is patty pose.
Yeah, which is fine.
Cool, but I want to see something more original and more kind of derivative of encounters that people have had.
Yes.
Because this is really neat. Like, I would buy this, like, if I could.
Yeah, like I said, I think I'm probably going to get it put into you know, some kind of a frame or something. And you know, Jonathan had other ones too. He actually did a full kind of drawing of the sighting that Bobo had actually at Bluff Creek. That was a really cool one. He did this hilarious sticker for me, the Sasquatch. Bear with me one second here.
Go ahead, man.
Just a few more of these things. So I'm gonna. What just happened? Let's see. I've got to just pull this down. X out of those. There's the Adirondacks picture there
Crazy.
that I got on my drone a few years ago. That's near Port Henry, New York, kind of known as the home of Champ,
Yeah, Champ.
up in that area. And Champ's another fun one. Let's see.
What's your thoughts on Champ?
There's something weird going on. Talked to a lot of witnesses there too. Something going on. But anyway, here's some more Jonathan Dodd art. So this was art he did based on a sighting that I had read about on a backpacking forum in the High Uintas mountain range in Utah, where we had hiked into. It was like plus 10,000 foot elevation. We were hiking 6 miles to this alpine lake last summer, and like halfway through, we had something stop us with wood knocks in the middle of the trail, and every time we turn the lights on, loud wood knocks. Very weird encounter. But I'd read about this encounter this guy had while he was at a kind of Boy Scout camp, and talking about being the trumpet. He was like the trumpet guy, and this creature came out of the woods, and this was the depiction that Jonathan Dodd had done for that. And then this was like how he described its eyes and kind of like the intelligence he saw. It was almost like surprised to see him. It didn't have that. It wasn't like a typical animal that might just act on instinct. It was almost like upset or kind of surprised to see him there.
Yeah.
Which reminded me of one of my first people I interviewed when it comes to Bigfoot, which was Dax Rushlow.
I just had him on the show.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. Yeah. So he was one of the first people I interviewed that about their Bigfoot sightings, because he was like, he lived in Massachusetts, and I where I lived in New Hampshire at the time wasn't that far, and I met up with him, and one of his story was pretty interesting. And then I talked to a lot of folks that he told the story to, and they're like, yeah, his story's always been the same. So that was the first of many encounters. But this encounter reminded me a little bit of that, just because the way he described this thing was looking with a sort of intelligence that you might not expect in a deer or something else.
Yeah, which Dax mentioned something similar to that too, about how this thing was like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?"
He said, "Yeah." I have an interview with him that I did on my Sasquatch Out of the Shadows channel back in the day, like 2016. The way Dax described it was there was like this intelligence there. It was cognizant of what was going on, and how he kind of, because he took that turn in the snowmobile, maybe he accidentally, this thing. I think at least Sasquatch go a lot on human predictability, because we are very predictable for the most part. When we're hiking the woods, we stick to the trail. We drive the roads. If we're snowmobiling, we stick to the trail. We usually do predictable stuff.
Yeah.
But he did something unpredictable, and it probably crossed paths with this thing. And that's probably the only times you can, I wouldn't say outsmart them, but just like chance an encounter.
Right.
This was the Slav Squatch. So I was like thinking about it, and unfortunately you can't see the text because it's blacked out here, but it says Slav Squatch. But I was thinking to myself, like, no one's done this before, I'm Slavic, and the Slav squat is kind of a thing. I'm like, Slav squat.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Have him in a tracksuit.
The tracksuit.
Yeah. I just thought it was kind of funny.
Oh, that's good.
What else do we got? This was actually his artistic rendition of Bobo's Bigfoot encounter at Louse Camp in Bluff Creek.
He said awesome.
That it had stuck out. The way he described it was almost like emaciated looking, very like tall, lanky looking Bigfoot. That's how he described it as, which I thought was really cool. And then this was a cool one he did of an actual pot grower in Northern California, claiming he sees this Bigfoot, he abandoned a pot grow. This was back when pot was illegal up there. And Bobo talks about this a lot. A lot of the encounters in Northern California happen with pot growers, going out to very remote areas. I mean, people have seen that documentary, the Sasquatch or Bigfoot one, where it like the bait and switch, the Hulu one that everyone got really pissed about. Which I thought was a great documentary.
It was, yeah.
Whether it was true or not, I mean, people, because the Bigfoot angle, but so a lot of those pot growers had legit encounters, and this was one of them that I think Ranger Robert Leiterman told me about, where a guy was up at an illegal grow, and he's noticing like something walking around. He has this gun out, and he sees this like Bigfoot swaying around, and it's got a rock in its hand, and he like left the grow and never came back, and was just totally freaked out by it.
Well, that's a waste of a good portion of pot.
Probably a lot of money lost there, but that's one of the first pieces of art Jonathan did for us. But
You go back to
yep.
that picture from the Bobo picture real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's this one right here.
So, you know what stood out to me about this immediately was the forearm. The forearm size compared to the upper arm size, that stood out to me instantly, because what I saw had that muscle on the forearm that like if you swing a hammer constantly over and over,
Yeah, that
that
would build up.
muscle,
Yep.
that right there, it was so big and so like I mean, it was massive. It was massive, man.
I've seen that on, like there's those lanky, muscular dudes that, they're super thin, but they're muscly and like it's almost like disproportionate.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine. I mean, that's kind of what Bobo had described in his sighting was it was like a pungent odor, and it's in the Bluff Creek episode, but he described it as that's what he saw, like just the kind of half of it sticking out from the tree. And then he goes down to either get like an audio recorder or something like that, and then it was already gone. And there's like this cloud of this smell kind of hung around the area, I guess. So,
I'd love to talk to him. He just seems like such a cool guy.
Yeah, he's definitely a very interesting guy. If you can get a hold of him. I see Brown Dwarf says he's had a Bobo encounter at Bluff Creek. Yeah, those guys, Cliff and Bobo, they used to literally almost live down at Bluff Creek for like weeks at a time when nobody really went down there before the Bluff Creek project was a thing. They would just go live down there and do their thing, just kind of have encounters. And it's just a great area. I mean, you could go down there and not run into people. People really only ever go in the summer months too. So
let's let me ask you a couple more questions real quick.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I'll close that out.
Somebody asked, is there ever a time that you felt like you were in danger while you were out investigating?
Yes, multiple times, and usually not because of Bigfoot. I mean, I'll say this now. Maybe this is naive, I don't know, but I don't personally think these things are killers or some reputation like they have. Everyone loves the killer Bigfoot stories, whatever. Like they're entertaining, but I think if these things wanted to kill you, they probably could very easily. But with all the encounters and everything we've had, just other people and the stories you hear, it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like there's aggressive behavior, the bluff charging, the throwing the rocks, the whooping, that kind of stuff. Maybe it's like to scare you, get you out of there kind of thing. But I've never really had an encounter where it was Bigfoot related, where I was kind of scared if Bigfoot was in the area, which I can't really confirm. But there's been other times, we're hiking in a sketchy area, and if someone were to fall, you'd be like, okay, you're pretty much done. But a couple times, mostly been human related. Actually, I've been kind of freaked out. One of them was in Oregon. We were out with Cliff Barrickman's guys from the North American Bigfoot Center, and they took us to a spot with a long history of sightings. And there was actually a great sighting from Joe Bielart's book, The Oregon Bigfoot Highway, right in this area of a fisherman who was fishing with his kids, and this like Sasquatch came out and was literally pushing them out of the area to the point where he used this fishing rod and was holding it. And the Sasquatch was basically, putting its hand against the rod and pushing him out, and they like drove him out of the area. So we're like, yeah, let's go to this. Let's go to this area. That sounds like a great spot. I mean, it's in the Mount Hood Wilderness area, which has just so many good sightings over the years. And we go down there and we're at this camp, and there's this like road that kind of loops around. It's this really bad old road. And there's like another truck there, and we hear people down at the river, but the way the campsite was, it was a bit of a slope, and the campsite's down here, and there's like a fire pit, not an official campsite. It's just national forest. So it's like a first come, first serve. So when you're on the road, you can look down in the campsite. But when you're in a campsite, you can't see the road. You just see the hill, and like the guardrails would be just a little bit further back. So we had set up there, and then there was a couple guys, there was like 7 of us there or something. A couple guys were down in the campsite, myself and like 3 other people. We were up by the trucks, and we had like a couple cars parked up there. And all of a sudden, like out of the woods, this dude just walks out wearing this weird gold vest with these like black pants on, looking super lanky, doing this weird strutting walk. And like he was kind of shocked to see us. And I'm the first who saw it because I was facing that direction. Like he just came out of the middle of the woods and he's walking towards us. And I'm like, what the F? And then and everyone else notices him, and we're all looking at each other. And one of the guys there that works for Cliff, the museum, is just like going for an evening stroll. And the guy's just like, yep, and just keeps walking. And I had like a 357 revolver on my hip, and I kind of just position, just kind of put it forward just so he could see, because you never know out there. I mean,
no, hell no.
Just it's like a little deterrent kind of thing. And he just kept walking, and then the guy Keith was like, there's nothing down there. I don't know where he's walking to. And he just kind of disappeared because there's like an old bridge there. So we were like, what is going on? And then I realized once it started getting darker, there was like a whole little series of trails going through those woods. And I looked down to that river, which was further from where our campsite was. And we see like a little fire on, and there was a big fire ban. This was in July of 2021. So there's like tons of forest fires. So you get in a lot of trouble for doing a fire, but they literally had like tiki torches on with, like in a circle, and they were like doing like walking around in circles and doing some kind of ritual or something. But we were like, okay, this is really weird. And then their truck was still parked up where our cars were. And I look into the car, and I see like a pentagram hanging, and there's all these bones hanging from the windshield, or from the rear view mirror. And I'm just like, okay, I just bad vibes. That guy really looked very weird. His outfit was super strange. We were like, well, let's just get out of here. I mean, there was a bunch of us, granted, but we were there to do Bigfooting. We don't want some cult ritual going on, a couple 100 feet in the woods from us.
Yeah, right.
So I don't, Brown Dwarf says hippies. I don't think they were hippies. They didn't look like any hippies that I know. I would have had less of we've run into hippies camping before, and no issues with those guys. These guys, this was something else. This guy had this weird, like, golden black vest on, weird pants. We got him actually filmed too, because the guy Keith had on his truck front and rear dash cams. So we got him, and we're just like standing there, all, what the heck? That was. I wouldn't say we felt like we were in danger, but it was weird. It was just, we just did not feel the vibes. And again, we're out there Bigfooting. We want to be the only people in the area that we can at least know about. So
sure,
we packed up at night, threw everything in the cars, tents, and just drove out of there. But there's other times where I wouldn't say we felt in danger, but we've just been in areas where there are other dangers present. So obviously Alaska, brown bear. I mean, it's like, that's why we were carrying 12 gauge shotguns and other kind of stuff that, I'd hate to have to do that to a bear, but it's either me or the bear at the end of the day, Other areas down south in Florida, we think the swamps are creepier at night. Honestly, they're not that creepy, at least from my experience. During the daytime is a little creepier because, there's gators out, and water moccasins, which are probably even more of a bigger concern than gators, and hogs too. Running into like a pack of hogs wouldn't be fun.
No,
so there's times like that, but I think it's all about preparation, making sure you have the right equipment, and just kind of knowing your limits, and being in numbers too. I've done stuff where I've gone solo, which I don't usually recommend, but it's usually in like easier to get to places. Like I wouldn't go to a place like that Alaska cabin alone. I mean, you physically cannot get there alone. But most places I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah, no, I tend to think the same thing. I don't think that these beings are malicious and violent by nature. I believe that if they were, you would have way more reports of people being mauled, and because physically they could do whatever the hell they want. I mean,
oh yeah, like we're talking about chimps and gorillas too. Like, yeah, if a chimp wants to be nice to you, it will. If it wants to rip your face off, there's really not a lot you can do.
I mean, look, it happened in Connecticut. That poor lady and her friend.
Oh my gosh! Or even just the gorilla Harambe, the one they had to kill.
Oh,
he was dragging that kid around like he was a little doll, just a toy.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, like nothing. They say that. I was reading a thing not too long ago that scientists say that like a gorilla's strength is literally immeasurable. That they don't have a way to determine how physically strong they really are, because there's just no way to really say like, oh yeah, okay, so they're 20 times stronger than a man.
Yeah, what do you do? Just put like a bunch of barbells in the so you see if he'll lift it.
Yeah, right.
Keep upping the weight. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. It's one. Yeah, I wonder that, but yeah, it's so fascinating. But you hear stuff like that, and then again with that car lifting story with the police cruiser, a gorilla maybe would be able to lift that cruiser, but was that a gorilla the guy encountered? That would almost be just as weird as it being a Sasquatch,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah. Why is there a gorilla in Massachusetts hanging out in the forest? Strange.
Crazy.
Janelle
But
wants to know if you've ever researched Alabama.
no, we have not been to Alabama, but I'd love to. I know northern Alabama is like kind of considered the foothills of the Appalachians, sort of. I know they get a lot of forests. At least I've been told that about the foothills thing. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I would love to check it out. I actually have this booklet back in the 90s. Like John Horgan is my friend. Like I said, he used to get a lot of these old. There weren't any Facebook groups or YouTube channels back then, so people used to communicate with newsletters. There'd be Ohio Bigfoot researcher newsletter, and they'd send out a booklet, and there was happened to be an Alabama one, and I found this in a bunch of old files he gave me, and this booklet had these. It was like all done by hand. I mean, you could tell they probably had to use like a typewriter or something to get it in, but the drawings were all done by hand, and they're basically like sketches. And they had this one cool encounter. I don't know where in Alabama, but it was like a Bigfoot seen in a tree. And it was one of those cool tree kind of encounters. And it just had a bunch of little illustrations in there. So I'd love to grab that booklet and take that when we do go to Alabama at some point. But yeah, I've been to Alabama just driving through it, but not Bigfooting out there. I'd love to. I've heard some great stories from that area. So yeah, northern Alabama especially.
So, yeah, I think so. Like, I have a little list that I've been working on, trying to put in order of places that I would want to go, like 1 through 5. I haven't gone further than that, but Bluff Creek is one because of just the whole lore behind it and the history and all that. Strictly based off of what I've heard of encounters and activity, Southeast Oklahoma is number 2.
That's high on my list too.
I have heard some of the most crazy activity and encounters from Southeast Oklahoma. Just the other night, I had the Sisters of the Moon on, and the encounters that they had down there and continue to have, like when they keep going back, are just insane.
Well, that whole region of like the Ozark Mountains, the Kiamichis, the
Yeah.
Ouachitas, I mean the NAWAC, the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, those guys, Area X, the infamous Area X is down there in the Ouachita Mountains, and that's an area that I've talked to. I know a lot of the NAWAC members, Kathy Strain, Matt Pruitt, Michael Mays. I mean, some of the top-notch researchers that I look up to, and some of the encounters they've had in there. And Seth Breedlove got to go down there when he was filming on the trail of Bigfoot a few years ago, I think back 2018, 2019 at this point. And he has this encounter that they had that like kind of convinced him. He was into Bigfoot, but he was, kind of like a hopeful skeptic, and that like swayed his needle almost to 95%. I mean, just they had this like wood knock rock throw encounter, and he says it sounded like a monkey started laughing at them from the woods. It's like a totally crazy encounter. And then Kathy Strain's encounter of seeing the baby chimpanzee in the tree. She was seeing this thing, and she's like, what is a baby chimp doing here? And like not realizing what she's seeing in the moment. And when I had her on my show, she talked about it. I was just like, that's, you're into Bigfoot. You're there for Bigfoot. You're seeing one, and your mind is telling you it's a chimp, not a Bigfoot,
Right.
Totally crazy. But I know there's, what's a guy named Bigfoot and More, Dave Wilbanks down in the Kiamichi Mountains.
Yeah.
He's had, I've talked to Cornell who's gone out with him before, and they've had some weird stuff happen there. And he seems like a very credible researcher too. I'd love to get down in that area. So that like southeastern part of Oklahoma has a long history. There's other stuff too. I'm leaving out. I've heard some other encounters, but I just haven't been to that area. It's actually funny, that whole region down south in like the southern kind of Texas area. If I look at it on a map, the only state I haven't been to is Oklahoma. I've been to like all the ones around it, driving cross country, you pass through Missouri and Kansas. I've been to Texas and Arkansas to Fouke. And then I was looking on a map, I'm like, Oklahoma is the only one I haven't been to. And like everything around there is filled out except for Oklahoma. So I'm like, okay, that's going to have to happen. So I might try to get down there. We're going to try to go to Area X at some point. Those guys have had us in. Here we go. Feeder, 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, so the feeder goes off.
Wow, it's 10 o'clock. Holy cow.
Yeah, here they go. Yeah.
All right, so let me see if there's any more questions,
Yeah, for sure.
And then I may ask you one or two more, and then I'll get you out of here. I got my booster yesterday for the COVID, my bivalent booster thing, and I feel like crap today.
Oh, that sucks.
I feel like crap, dude.
Sorry to hear that.
It hit me like out of nowhere. I got it yesterday morning at 8 a.m. And then today at like 11, I started getting a little bit of a headache. By like 1 o'clock, I was like, I was fully felt like I was sick, man. The chills, the body aches, the lethargy. So
maybe it worked out for the best last night.
yeah, probably, yeah. Going back to David Wilbanks. So David's a part of my group, the Encrypted Connections Facebook group.
Cool.
Super nice guy. He just released a new book recently.
Yeah, I haven't checked it out. I just know Cornell used to have a podcast. I forget the name of it, but he would do it with him sometimes. And he had told me about, because I had met him when he first kind of got into the Bigfoot topic. He said he was going down there and met this guy, and they went down there, and he said he got whoops outside his tent, like all this other stuff, and spoke very highly of him. And I, would love to get down there. But like between him and the NAWAC, just Oklahoma, there seems to be a lot going on there, and people wouldn't expect that. They think Oklahoma's flat and like prairie-like, but if you actually look at that eastern, southeastern part on like Google Earth, you'd be very surprised about No Such Thing podcast. That's the one. Yeah. You'd be surprised at how interesting that area looks. And I mean, I've talked to tons of people that are in the NAWAC and people with ex-military, all, the Tag 7. I highly recommend people check that out. Where they got this possible tracking device on one of these things and literally followed it on an airplane. It's like it's like out of a James Bond movie, but with Bigfoot. Like these guys, they do some great work. The NAWAC, I recommend their Tag 7. Read about that or listen to the podcast about it. It's super fascinating. They're like engineers and ex-military guys. How do we find this thing? And they managed to get this like GPS tracker on this little cockle burr thing, and they hung it from a tree 7 feet up, and it got stuck to something. And once you eliminate all the other potential suspects, it got really weird because they were almost on this thing and it would always get away, and just like pretty crazy stuff.
Oh, I'll have to check this out because I've never heard
hundreds of
this.
Rocks thrown at the cabin out there. They have tons of audio on their website, really great repository of audio samples, stuff that they've collected over the years in Area X. So yeah, anyway, Southeast Oklahoma is very high on the list. Hopefully will happen in 2023. So yeah.
2023. You heard it here first, guys. 2023, Encrypted Connections and Aleksandar Petakov are going to Southeast Oklahoma. Just kidding. All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll get you out of here. Just a couple more.
Yeah, no worries.
So, if you, what is, because I hear you say a lot, like, you kind of sway towards never really saying it's Bigfoot, because, obviously if you don't see it, then you can't say that, right? What do you believe this creature is? What's your theory?
That's a good question. So the reason I'm kind of cautious about what I say or how I portray an encounter or how I explain it is because, again, I can't say 100%. I mean, we think it fits the pattern of behaviors described by these things. Mm-hmm. And I can talk to people who've been in a Bigfoot that I've never met that have had the same types of encounters and will have the same kind of reactions to it. But I'm the kind of guy that's sort of like, that's not good enough sort of thing, where I don't want to sound like rude by saying this, but I'll get people that send me like footprints and that kind of stuff. And pictures is always so hard to tell. Like, I've never found a track that's like super perfectly clear. I mean, even the one we cast in New Hampshire, it was pretty clear. I mean, there's some toes and stuff you could see, but I'm always looking for something that's better because I'd like to move the needle more in terms of, being able to either prove this or just, know for myself either way. That's kind of a preface. And I'm not saying, like all the stuff I've encountered definitely isn't Bigfoot. I mean, it very well could be. I love to be able to have a data point where I can be like, okay, well, we heard wood knocks. we heard a whoop and we saw a creature. That's like, so you're able to prescribe the behavior to actually seeing a creature. Just like if I was to hear, a moose call and then see moose, I'm able to confirm that behavior. I think, that's something we need. But what do I think these things are? I personally lean towards it being some sort of a relict hominid, something that maybe we don't even know what it is yet. I mean, there's a lot of interesting possibilities out there. Maybe there's more than one type of thing going on here in North America as opposed to, say, Asia. I mean, there's the orang pendek
Yeah,
in
the little
Sumatra,
guy.
which is like a small thing, and it really corresponds with the Homo floresiensis, so-called hobbit. So I think it's some kind of relict hominid. I mean, a lot of people talk about the weirder aspects of it, and I'm not really into that, but I don't disregard it. I mean, I think a lot of researchers in the past that have been super set in one way will disregard any of the paranormal aspects or anything like that, and not even include it in a report. They'll literally omit it, which I don't think is right. The majority of people I've talked to, eyewitness encounters, have said it behaved in a way, or what they described of this creature to me says it's behaving in a way like there weren't any weird elements. It was, I saw it run across the road, or it ran up this hill. It was cornered by these dogs and then it ran away. Like it didn't disappear into a ball of light or something. Majority, like probably 80+% of reports that I've heard, there's no weirder elements. Like the weirdest part of it is seeing a Sasquatch or seeing multiple or getting roared at and feeling it in your chest and like these other kind of things. There are minority reports where there are like orbs and other stuff involved. And I'm not discounting that. I just, I haven't seen a link personally. I've had weird things happen. I've seen UFOs. I've seen other things out in the woods. Do I know that they're necessarily connected with Sasquatch? Not necessarily. But like I said, I do lean towards it being some sort of relict hominid. Not Gigantopithecus or anything, which wouldn't really be a hominid. They think it's more of a pongid, which would be like a relative of the orangutan. But there's a lot of really interesting creatures. I mean, I've talked to Gareth Patterson in South Africa. They describe the otang down there.
Yeah.
And that's in an area where they have the Australopithecines, Lucy, all these other creatures lived in that area. Like they call the so-called cradle of human not civilization, but humankind, just all the different, hominids and things that lived in that area. And they still have sightings to this day. I just got a report like literally this week from a guy in South Africa who had some kind of a sighting in a wooded area of this like hairy creature. And they thought it was a baboon, and then turns out it wasn't. So I think there's still enough places in the world for these things to hide. If they are flesh and blood, if they're not, then that's a whole nother story. Or maybe they have some sort of abilities, but people get really caught up on the flesh and blood versus, paranormal kinds of things. And I say, whatever this thing is, even if it is paranormal, it's clearly still interacting physically with an environment by leaving footprints, throwing rocks, doing whatever the purported behaviors are. So even if it is doing some weird shape-shifty type stuff, I mean, maybe it could be, I don't know. It's still interacting with its environment. So you still can track them. You still can. People have gotten alleged videos of them, of audio recordings. I have things that I think are Bigfoot on audio, that kind of stuff. So whatever it is, it can still physically interact with this plane of existence that we're in. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but that's the way I see it. And this cashew person is, man, they're like on top of it with the links. Wow. Every time I mention something, they throw a link. That's impressive.
Listen, Cashew is my moderator, and Cashew has been here since day one. She moderates many channels. I don't know how many. I don't think she knows how many. But
that is
and
clearly looks like she's doing a good job, because every time I mention someone's channel or something, a link
it's instant.
So that's great. That's so cool.
It's instant. And not only that, she has helped me behind the scenes tremendously with this channel. She is a whiz at helping to connect people with other people and use that friendship to help each other grow, instead of having the divisiveness where it's like, oh, no, you do your thing, I'll do mine. There's not enough room for both of us. Where she believes that, no, we as a community can help each other. And she's amazing. She really is. She's incredible. So I'm
Yeah,
glad you noticed.
Yeah, well, it's like every time I've seen the links, even the stuff that's like more obscure that I'm mentioning. So I would definitely say check out Gareth Patterson's website because he like rescued lions. He tracked this secret, previously thought extinct group of elephants in the rainforest
Yes.
in South Africa, in an area where these otang Bigfoot creatures are seen, and there's like elephants that people can't locate. So hello, I mean, if they can't find a tribe of elephants out there, imagine what else is out there. So I digress, but go check that
I
out.
spoke with Gareth actually not too long ago because I read some of the stuff that he was talking about too about the otang, and
Yeah,
I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then
so
the
next
elephant,
level.
and then the elephants, even just like you said, like that's amazing
Oh yeah,
on its own right. So I reached out. I said, listen, I know it's a long shot, but is there any chance that you'd be willing to come on the show? And he's like, I will. I just am in Africa doing all this research. And he's like, so when I get back, I'll be back in whatever, I forget what time I have to recheck. And he said, just send me a message. And he was a
yeah.
very
There's
nice
a
guy.
big time difference, and like when I had him on, my show was also live, but I had to pre-record it because South Africa, and I was actually born in South Africa. Fun fact.
Oh, wow.
So I have this like connection there. So I've always wanted to go, and this gives me another reason to go. But they
Yeah.
have like a lot of electrical grid issues, so power outages are not uncommon there. So he was saying, if we're in the middle of an interview, like don't be surprised if suddenly screen goes dark because I may lose my power. So um, that was kind of an interesting experience. But the time zone difference, obviously, you kind of gotta work around it. But yeah, I would highly recommend talking to him. Just he talked for like an hour just about his work with the lions and then the elephants before he even got to the otang stuff. He could have done a whole show just about his work with wildlife. And the guy's not like he's not a Bigfoot guy. He just happened to encounter this stuff while looking for a group of elephants that were thought to be extinct that people weren't locating in the rainforest. It's like insane actually once you think
So
about it.
crazy. So crazy.
Amazing story for sure.
I sent you two pictures to your messenger, so you can look at them when we're done here. One is a 14 and 3/4 by 6.5 inch track that I found about a month ago
Oh wow.
in the
Yeah.
sand, and then
That's
and,
interesting.
and then the baby
That's a
is,
smaller one. Yeah, I was gonna say a
yeah,
little
that's
smaller.
4.5 inches long.
It's weird,
Um,
man.
that one I didn't find. That one a friend of mine found in West Virginia recently.
Oh yeah,
Um,
West
on the
Virginia's great, like a great state. There's just a ton of great encounters in there. I gotta say.
Oh, dude, I'll send you some other stuff he sent me that is just wicked, wicked strange, really strange.
Appalachia, man, there's a lot of weirdness down there,
There
even just
sure
well
is.
beyond Bigfoot.
Yeah, it
The
sure is.
Mothman, Flatwoods Monster. Literally here, Braxy. Here's the Braxton County Monster. This is the candles this is like a candle thing they make. So yeah, the story was, in Sutton, West Virginia, they have the West Virginia Bigfoot Museum, and right down the street is the Flatwoods Monster Museum where they sell this stuff. And we were driving through there last November, and we went to Cryptid Con in Lexington, Kentucky, and then my girlfriend at the time, my now fiance, and I.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, we were driving back, and we stopped at the museum. Got to stop at all the cryptid stuff. Hit the Mothman Museum on the way down, but we're leaving the Flatwoods Museum, and this young girl's working the counter. She's like, "Oh, I got this cat. If you guys know anyone who like needs, I can't keep it." And she pulled him up, and he was this little tiny thing, and we were just like instantly like, "Oh man." Like, how long is the drive back to New Hampshire? To New England. So we're like, we actually were going to my buddy Les Odell, who's another great researcher, maybe Cashew. I think his YouTube is like West Virginia Cryptid Encounters or something like that.
I'm
Les
sure she
Odell,
knows what it is.
one of the nicest guys out there, super genuine researcher in West Virginia. But we went to his house that night, and I'm like, "Hey man, so complication, we're going to be bringing an extra guest," and he was like totally cool with it, and it made a really interesting journey. I wish he was here. I don't know where he went. He would like try to jump on this mattress I have over here, and then fell down because the blanket fell off, and he probably ate all his food. He literally scarfs it down and ran out. So yeah, so the Braxy, the cryptid cat. So it's again that West Virginia connection. We figured we name him Braxton after Braxton County.
So cool, man.
Braxton County Monster. So we're like, and they call him the monster Braxy for short. So we're like, I guess he's a little bit of a monster. So we'll go with that. But he's good. He's very well behaved. He's one of those cat dogs. Dog.
Oh,
cats.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I have 3, and they're all rescues, and they're all very different from each other. They're all they all. I mean, especially the 2 brothers, Ollie and Otis. They are super sweet. And Hope is very sweet, but Hope is the queen. She knows it.
She's like, yeah, she's got her own thing going on.
She's the queen. She was here first. She was here before. She was here before everybody, and it was only about 4 months before the boys. But she was here first, and she knows it, and she's the head of the house, and she doesn't let anyone forget it. She can be very sweet, but she's also a giant biatch when she wants to be.
Yeah. See, so we have another one too, and luckily he's a Russian blue, so he's very talkative.
Wow.
The Braxy's like a tabby, but yeah, the other one was hers before she got him. He was also a rescue. I think he had like ringworm, so he was the runt of the litter. And so, he was kind of always the king, and now Braxy's been in the picture for about a year. They get along pretty well for the most part. It's like brotherly love kind of thing.
Yeah.
You get in a fight with your brother just because, it's just a thing you do. They get along well, but they're both kind of like dog cats. They're pretty affectionate. They're not like, oh, leave me alone, human. I don't just feed me and clean up my poop and don't touch me, kind of thing. So they're both pretty good, which is nice. So
Russian blues are beautiful.
Very elegant cats. Yeah.
Beautiful cats.
Super soft feel, and they're very chatty, very talkative.
Yeah, they are. Yep.
He's always, saying something or complaining about something or giving more wet food,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So they make it interesting, but Braxy is just like a little over a year old, so he's just still
little baby.
He's still kind of getting out of his kitten phase. So.
Oh, that's fun. All right, so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to get out of here. I'm going to go to bed. I'm tired. I'd love to talk to you all night if I could, but
I got
you. But we'll have you back on at some point for sure. What do you think it is that needs to be done differently in this field in order to continue furthering this research of these creatures? Because we've been doing things the same way, right? And I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that we've been doing the same thing and gathering the same results over and over. So what do you think it is that if there's anything that we can do differently moving forward to try to gain more access to these creatures, what would that be?
It's a really good question. I mean, I've gotten asked it before, but it's kind of a complicated answer. There's, I think, a few things. I think a lot of the time, if you look at like the patterns, the data that we do have in terms of eyewitness sightings and how many, what percentage of sightings are random, people just didn't expect to see a Bigfoot. They're hiking or they're driving their car and one runs across the road, almost hits them, whatever. It's so random. So if we can up the probabilities of somebody being at the right place at the right time with the right equipment, because most people, they see a Bigfoot, it's like they're getting caught with their pants down. They're not ready for it. And it's happened to me too. When we've had in the middle of an incident, we're all like holding thermal cameras and we're like, what the heck's going on? Oh, let's turn it on. You get that initial shock. If we can desensitize a little bit to the idea that something like this could be out there, maybe people wouldn't be as shocked and they wouldn't, hang onto a story for 20 years until they retire before being willing to talk about it. The career destroyer or credibility killer. I think just getting into some of these areas too. I really think, again, getting into some of these remote spots and even other areas where there's activity, and just, I think as the technology gets better, I really hope, I think we'll catch up to it. Because even thermal stuff now is still expensive, but it's getting better and better. I mean, with drones and all this kind of stuff. And if it is flesh and blood, I mean, we're going to be able to, at some point when that technology is great. I mean, people always say, well, there's thousands of trail cameras in the woods. Everyone's got a cell phone. So you get a random animal. I've had a freaking 1,000-pound moose run out in front of my car. And by the time my camera's ready, it's already in the tree line. I have no way of seeing it. Done. Yeah. If I had a thermal camera, a thermal thing on my phone that was extremely great quality, maybe I could have seen it, So as the tech is better, I wouldn't be surprised if we get more video stuff like that. But I think, unfortunately, still people are going to want a body. That's going to be the minimum, which really kind of sucks. But maybe there's a way to, for example, couple different pieces of evidence. Let's say you get a visual and you're able to get some kind of piece of it or something. You're able to, different tiers of evidence, because that's one of the things with eyewitness sightings, that an individual eyewitness sighting may not be super useful. I mean, it can tell you a lot of things. It may be very interesting, but if it happened so many years ago, I mean, you can go to that spot and say, well, there was a Bigfoot sighting here 20 years ago. What does that really do to further the search? But when you get a fresh eyewitness sighting, you might be able to actually go out there and gather, footprints or find a secondary piece of evidence to start backing up that story. So I think just that's part of it. And I think just I see a lot of like exploitation of the topic online with certain programs and mostly like big network stuff. That's just, I wouldn't consider it credible. I mean,
Yeah.
we kind of talked a little bit about the stuff with like Cliff and Bobo and those guys and finding Bigfoot, and how, there was a show. I think they did it as good of a job as they could have done, but they're a big crew of guys out in the woods. They're not a small team that's actually, they're primarily doing it for that entertainment purpose. But there are other shows that have no problem with faking stuff, where people are playing a role. And I won't say any names. I mean, people can probably draw some conclusions. There's, very popular sort of programs that I think do a disservice a little bit to the topic, because they spread dishonesty.
I'll say names. I don't have any problem with that, because I can't stand it. I may give it the wrong name though. Is that silly show Mountain Monsters or whatever the hell it is?
So, well, I would say primarily Mountain Monsters is. I've actually watched it. It's kind of entertaining. Like I've met those guys before. They go to these events. They're actually pretty funny. They're very down to earth guys.
They seem like maybe that's not the one I'm thinking of, because those guys are pretty funny.
They're funny, but their show, people actually believe it, which just I think is a testament to the intelligence of some people, unfortunately. Yeah. But I think, I've seen an episode where they were like searching for the Wampus cat and got peed on from the tree. Like, I think that's, most people that can think for themselves can draw the conclusion that, all right, this is kind of like a parody. I don't have as big of a problem as that as I do, like, say a show like Expedition Bigfoot, where there's sort of like a, there's a lot that could go into it, but I don't think there's some honesty. There's some honesty issues. Like, you can't have as frank of a conversation with some of the cast members about certain shenanigans that maybe go on. Season 1, their location was a little weird. Stuff like that. And there's other shows, the Travel Channel puts out a lot of stuff that I think is a little bit kind of weird at times. And from what I've heard from people, they don't have problems with faking certain stuff for ratings. Just a lot of these other programs. I think Expedition or Finding Bigfoot was really one of those exceptions. And if you talk to Cliff or Bobo, they'll tell you like, hey, we were limited with TV. Like, they tried to fake them. The producers tried to hoax them in season 1, and those guys basically did a mutiny and said, if you guys continue this, we're like going to drop off the show, because we don't play that. Like, they are not playing the roles of Bigfooters. These guys are actually, they've been doing it before and after the show. They never really did anything differently.
That's so good to hear that. I'm so happy that they did that.
Yeah. So like, and I mean, if you listen to Cliff and Bobo's podcast, they'll tell you like they were limited with TV. They go out 10, 15 guys at woods in the night. Like, what are they going to have happen? Because they've got all these guys with cameras and people that are doing their job that aren't interested in the Bigfoot side of it. They're just they're there because it's like they're a sound guy, so they can only care so much about Bigfoot, whereas like someone like Cliff or something, they would obviously primarily they're trying to get something because that's what they've been doing. But God, this has been a long tangent. I don't even know where I was going with this, but I guess my point is, I think a lot of these sort of channels and big networks really kind of, they're the people, may not be necessarily even the people in the shows.
No,
if they're willing to go along with it, I'd say that's kind of an issue. But like the higher ups, they don't care about the Bigfoot topic, right? No. To them, it's an ends to a means. Like they're not vested in Bigfoot, being truthful or not. They're like, oh, can we add this sound effect in? I think that'll make it more dramatic. And, you can say, well, that's not like what happened at all. But I don't think they really care. They see dollar signs. They don't see honesty when it comes to it. So, and I say this to not at all inflate my ego or inflate what we do, but I think it's just super simple to just tell the truth about what's going on. If you encounter something super weird, like, Tate down in Florida, and we saw like orbs in the trees, like, we didn't omit that. I mean, that doesn't necessarily fit what we think is Bigfoot. We don't even know if that was Bigfoot related. It was just something weird that happened when we were there. You know what I mean? So I think it's the metrics that we have too. It speaks for itself. People are willing to watch us in huge numbers. We compete with some of these cheesy programs that get put on TV that have a lot more money backing them than independent stuff, and we're up against that, and yet people are still choosing to watch it. So again, I say that completely humble. You're not. I don't expect you to believe me. You don't have to at all. Like, you can totally tell me I'm BS or whatever, and I'm willing to talk. Like, I'm willing to have the discussion about, well, what we had happen here or whatever. And again, not to credit myself, that's just completely, I'm trying to be transparent. That's the whole point of it.
Right.
So I don't know if you can necessarily get that with other folks in certain programs and that sort of thing. So, and I'm not calling anyone out. I'm just saying that's, I think, in the Bigfoot topic, steering more towards, the honest kinds of discussions and saying, well, we don't know as much as we maybe think we do, or we don't know everything about this topic, even if, because some people I think will assume there's like Bigfoot experts and people, but I mean, if there's an expert, do they have footage? Do they have, have they proven it? I'm certainly no expert. I'm just a guy who likes to get out there, and we have things happen. And, it's just one of those things that I think you need to be humble about it. And I think we could use a little bit more of a reality check in certain aspects with the Bigfoot topic, because really anyone could go on and make stuff up on a YouTube video or get platformed on TV and kind of make stuff up and repeat it enough times, and it becomes part of a fact. And we see this happen with other topics where people make stuff up, and it, like creepypasta type stuff, and people start seeing that, and law enforcement, they have a term for it, which always slips my mind whenever I bring it up. But it's this effect. It's like a pop culture effect where they'll notice in the reports when people are calling the police for certain crimes or things that happen, they describe in a certain way that may be influenced by pop culture or like a certain style of TV show. Law enforcement notices that. Like the killer clowns is one of those things. It's like a mass hysteria thing where somebody starts saying clowns, and all of a sudden other people are seeing clowns in the area, and they're like influenced by what others are saying. So, I think that happens certainly with Bigfoot as well to some extent. And I don't know, just keeping it down to the basics, I guess. I think I'm going way too long in this tangent here.
No, you're good. You're good.
But I think, I don't know. I just think there's always room for improvement. We're always trying to find ways to improve or just get some activity, get something going on, being able to find something more conclusive. We'd love that, but we're not gonna trick our audience and say, oh, this footprint we just made is legit. We're going to keep it real. I'm not going to insult people's intelligence, and assume, that they're dumb and they need to be tricked, like some network exec probably does do, because they're unscrupulous. They don't care. Like, I'm actually invested in this topic. I actually want to find out what's going on for myself, probably more so than anything else. I want to get to the bottom of it, see one of these things if they're real, which I'm assuming at this point. As I said, I'm leaning heavily towards that. But I think it's just we need to be more honest with ourselves too.
Which it's important that more people like yourself and Seth, because Seth obviously has the same mindset as you to be doing this, and then people like Doug, who had a vested interest also, that he saw things that made him believe, and then wanted to know what the reality was, and wasn't willing to compromise any integrity to do so. It was, we're doing this the right way, and that's that. I have a couple friends, I'm not going to say their names because I can't right now. They are in a contract negotiation with for a TV show, and they said, well, what about if we actually film one of these things, which obviously is a very, very minimal chance, right? But they wanted to know, what if we film one of these things? And the TV channel said, well, we probably won't use it because the whole point of this is to get people to continue tuning in, right?
Yeah.
And
Crazy, right?
it was like, wait, what?
I would
Like,
expect either that kind of reaction or, oh, we own rights to the footage, so you guys cannot, credit yourselves or anything. They'd probably just, sweep the rug out right from under them. That's, again, I mean, I think these people are seeing it. It's an ends to a means. Like, it's for them, it's just amplify the dollars. It's not.
it is. They wanted these
truth.
dudes to do this show. They wanted them basically to quit their jobs, do this show, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to pay you $10,000."
Yeah, I mean, and while they're raking it in from whatever, it's again, I think that the exploitation angle, and there's tons of documentaries and great independent content out there. We're certainly not the only ones doing that. Absolutely not claiming that. There's some other fantastic people out there for sure. Great YouTube channels, great researchers. There's people that aren't really public, that don't do like documentaries, that just do, like I said, the Olympic Project, NAWAC are two of my favorites, just because they really have a very, methodical way of documenting data and stuff that a lot of other folks don't do. There's some people that they don't document their data much, but they're just like really good in the woods, and they're straight shooters. I've run into the gamut of types of people that are into this topic. Some fantastic folks that you want, are the kind of people you want out in the woods with you, whether they're into Bigfoot or not. Just all the different kind of perspectives that I've heard, at least from people that I've dealt with, and the good definitely outweighs the bad for sure.
Yeah,
because a lot of people like to focus on the bad, and there's drama, and I would say well, the drama's online or interpersonal. I mean, Bigfoot is not going to be involved. Like, Bigfoot's out there. You have to go out there to actually look.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking people that aren't, field researchers. Some people can't get out in the woods, and I understand that. And I love being able to bring people along for our kind of stuff. You get tons of people telling me, they're sick and they're immobile, whatever, and they live kind of vicariously through us. And those kinds of people, you never know. They can sit online all day, and they can do all the patient maybe analyzing of data that we might overlook because we're like exhausted from being out in the field. Those people also play a definite role, in like the kind of armchair researcher types. I'm not knocking them at all. I just think when either side decides to knock each other, oh, you're just an armchair researcher, what do you know? Or, oh, you're just a field researcher, going out there doing the same thing. You don't know what you're talking about. So there's ways to coexist and use both of those skills for sure.
Everybody, I think that's the cool thing about this this subject. This is still a scientific subject, right? But the thing is that we, in any other scientific field, people like me, who I'm not educated, right? I mean, I'm educated through high school and a little bit of education after high school, but I'm not an educated guy. I don't have degrees. In any other scientific field, I wouldn't be able to do anything. But because science has basically turned their back on this subject for the most part, people like me are allowed to be a part of this.
It's cool. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, some of the greatest people I've met through this topic, barely even have high school education, but guess what? They know the woods.
Yeah.
They know the woods, and they know the difference between a bear, a mountain lion, and a Bigfoot that they claim to have seen or whatever. So, I think it's just when you get different types of people from different backgrounds, you can get a totally arrogant person who's a scientist who maybe gets a few weeks field time a year, but is, this thing can't exist. I mean, I've had actually pretty pleasant interactions with people that are scientists, but I don't know if I've ever talked about this particular case publicly, but somebody I'd been contacting about, let's just say, certain other primates, known primates that I was inquiring about, using pieces of footage for a video. And, the response was like it was just a very nice kind of, I was just inquiring, and the response I got back was basically, oh, we don't want anything to do with anything cryptozoology related. Sasquatch is not real. Like, this is stupid. It was just like this super, just like, okay, where'd the Bigfoot hurt you kind of thing. And I've never run into that. I've had plenty of scientists and people I've talked to that are skeptical, and they're respectful. They're like, well, I disagree that there could be something like this out there, but, I think it's interesting from a cultural perspective. And that was like the most rude response I've got. And then I found out that this person was actually also not really they were a scientist, but they were also politicians. So I'm like, okay,
Oh, okay, there we
that
go.
kind of makes sense.
Makes sense. Where
It
did
was, yeah,
Bigfoot hurt you?
that's just my reaction. I was like, this was so over the top rude. I mean, you could have just said, no, we don't want anything to do with Bigfoot.
Yeah,
But they were
right.
like, okay, if you're so sure, I mean, that's fine. But I mean, is that truly scientific to, I don't even think you've probably even looked at this topic much. So I just
Yeah.
find that funny. But yeah, I haven't had a lot of bad stuff from scientists like that. I've actually had some pretty pleasant exchanges with folks, scientific folks that are well. But like I said, you got people that have no education at all that just know the woods. They might be able to know a certain area better than a scientist could just because they read it, and then other way around in certain areas too. So
Or I mean,
I think it comes down to the individual character of the person that you're working with and that sort of thing.
yeah,
Ultimately,
absolutely. And there's people out there that have no education, but still have they have other abilities, right? So
yeah,
they just because they didn't go to college doesn't mean that they're not as
they're not
intelligent as
book
the
smart,
person
but
that did,
yeah, right.
or they can't figure these things out the same way that somebody who did go to college can. There's people out there who are brilliant,
Oh, absolutely.
brilliant minds and think differently than you and I do, and can probably figure things out maybe even better in some cases. And
Definitely.
that's the cool thing about this subject, is that those people, if they're part of this subject in this community, they have the opportunity to be a part of discovering something that would be completely groundbreaking,
Right.
and should change the complete fabric of society, because if it's found, if it's proven, and if it's part human, now you're talking about a living relative of ours.
You'd think that would be effective, but I honestly, like in the last few years, I always thought that, the discovery of Bigfoot would be like, whoa, you wouldn't look at the woods ever the same again. But I've been more and more, maybe I've become more cynical. I'll say maybe that's that's the reason for it. But I don't know if it would have as big of an effect. I think it would be a novelty for a little bit, but look at what's going on with the UFO
Oh,
topic.
dude, I say this all the time.
It's crazy. They basically, and if you really need the government to come out and tell you something's real, then that's your thing. But a lot of people talk about disclosure, and like, well, the government ever disclosed Bigfoot. I'm like, well, look at what they're doing with the UFO thing. Like, it's not even top news. It's not. It's like a side note in the stories will be, oh, basically the Pentagon is admitting that UFOs are real, and we don't know what they are, where they're from. Next page, oh, here's the latest congressional scandal or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like,
It
whoa,
should have
man.
been. It
So
should have been the
Bigfoot,
biggest front
yeah,
headline
it's
news in the last 100 years.
wild. So I think, and then I just wonder, like, because I have friends that obviously are not into Bigfoot. I have family, everyone's not everyone's into Bigfoot, and I honestly sometimes I can't understand it because you get so into a topic, into a subject like. You and I are both really interested in this topic, so it may be hard for us to understand why somebody couldn't be interested in it. Because I look at that, I'm like, how are people not interested in the fact that there may be this undiscovered creature just lurking around in the wilderness, doing all this crazy stuff, having people see it? How are you not interested in that? But some people just aren't, and I'm not knocking them at all. It's just, even if it were to be proven tomorrow, I think it would be like somebody reading their newspaper, oh, Bigfoot's real. How are the Patriots doing? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that would happen. So I don't know. I mean, it would be really interesting, like a social standpoint, to see how people's reactions would be. I think some people would go over the top and fearful of everything, and it'd be a panic and a craze, like, oh, these things could be anywhere, kind of thing. But I see a lot of parallels with the mountain lion topic. That's something that I've been into, like mountain lions in the eastern part of the U.S. where they're not supposed to be. And there's a very similar parallels to the Bigfoot topic, and especially in the way the government treats it, where they're kind of just like, let's just not talk about it and hope people forget about it, or make anyone who's into it look crazy. I don't think there's a grand conspiracy necessarily, at least in some aspects. But government people are lazy that work in there. If they don't have to deal with paperwork, they probably won't have to. And I've been told by people that work in the government, they're like, they get a lot more credit for some of this kind of stuff than that. But I think it breeds distrust. Like I've seen in the mountain lion topic, people distrust government because they're told that, oh, these things can't be here. And then there's credible sightings and there's actual DNA evidence that gets found that literally gets downplayed. Like that happened in Massachusetts with the lady I interviewed in my Lions of the East film. She has, like, by 2 extremely credible labs, male mountain lion DNA confirmed, and the state of Massachusetts basically does not answer the phone anymore and just kind of probably hoping it goes away.
Well, they found that one trotting down the road in Connecticut, many years ago.
That was 2011. I remember that. I was in Connecticut at the time, and I actually, a few years ago when I was working on my film Lions of the East, I ran into at a paranormal event in New Hampshire a guy who was a cop down in Connecticut in this, like, literally 5 miles from where this mountain lion was killed. A few days before that happened, he saw a mountain lion cross the road, like plain as day in his cruiser. All of his friends, everyone was like, "You saw a bobcat?" You know?
Yeah.
He's like, "I saw a mountain lion," and then a few days later, like miles down the road, this thing gets killed. So I mean, his sighting essentially was confirmed, right?
Yep.
What are the chances there? So that's pretty interesting. But that was a big case, and they kind of had to admit, yeah, these things do come out from out west. And like I said, I've seen a lot of parallels. I feel like that could be a whole nother show. Parallels between the mountain lion online stuff, mountain lions of the East, and then Bigfoot. There's a lot of parallels. It's very actually interesting once you get down to it. But I digress.
We'll bring you back on to do that show.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to end this. I gotta get some sleep. But I would love to have you back on. This was wonderful, man. I really, I'm so grateful that you came on. Like I said, I've been watching you for a long time. Probably since you guys started, which was the 2016, 15.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a while. I've been doing stuff on and off with Small Town Monsters before Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, and now obviously that's been the primary stuff I've been doing is over there on their YouTube. So, I mean, we've had a lot of fun. We're not slowing down anytime soon.
Awesome.
And keep it up, and I really hope that we can get something. And I'm not saying that in a way that I want to be the one who proves it, but I just want to help move that needle forward. And maybe if we can get some convincing and nudge some scientists or other people to want to get involved, like, here, you guys take over from here or whatever, or we'll tell you what we know. I don't know. I mean, we just hope that something like that can happen. So
awesome, man. And congrats on 100,000. That is incredible. Really, that's just amazing. Those are huge numbers, dude.
Yeah, we did not see that coming, but
I'm sure the film probably helped.
It was like, literally, I kid you not, 10 days ago we were at just over 90,000 subscribers, and like a week later we're over 100,000.
That's like 1,000 subscribers a day.
Yeah. Oh, it was crazy. I was watching the numbers. I mean, it was through the roof when that video dropped, and that video has had 500,000 views, over 500,000 views in a week that it's been out.
Oh, that's amazing.
And to put it into perspective, we have a handful of other videos, Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, that are over 500,000 views. And it's like that one of them was posted last November. So it's like, to this point, it's gotten 500,000. So to have one in a week reach basically what the other ones have done in over a year is like totally crazy. And the coolest thing to me has been it's going outside of the usual people who watch the Bigfoot stuff. We're getting a lot of comments and messages from people that are not into the Bigfoot topic. They're like, "Oh, I saw your documentary. I thought it was really interesting." Like, "Oh, I've always thought, Bigfoot was silly, but then I saw your documentary and I'm like, wow, this actually may be something I'll look into." So we're tapping beyond that, cryptozoology kind of fan base, which I think is awesome because you never know, man. I get a lot of great stories from like the hiking, the backpacking community,
sure,
and the outdoorsmen. Those are the ones that I love to look into because they have great stories and they're not necessarily looking for Bigfoot, right? I mean, when a Bigfooter's out there and they claim that they've seen Bigfoot, I'm automatically going to be a little more skeptical, or maybe not skeptical, but stringent in questioning and say, because if that was me, I want somebody to grill me because I'm out there for that express purpose. But somebody's out there backpacking and has something happen. I mean, that's they're in the right place at the right time. So, so it's just been really cool. So I appreciate the kind words, and thanks so much for having me on. I think it's been an awesome conversation. I mean, 2.5 hours, and I think we could keep going easily.
We could, yeah.
Exhaustion wasn't a thing, but we'll leave that for another time.
We
And
could.
I think it was worth the hassle, the power outage, and all that stuff to get here. So
Yeah, and my screwing up the first one with I did forgot what time zone
oh
I was
yeah,
in, and yeah, all that stuff.
no
But that even
worries.
worked out well because that show was really good that night.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah. Well, this was awesome, Alex. I really appreciate it. You're a wonderful guy. Really, you're just a really good guy and a blast to talk to. Um,
You
this
as
was.
well, man. Your
Thank
encounter
you.
seriously is incredible. I mean, I enjoyed hearing it, and it just like I on that show, with Doug, I was saying, just for me, I wasn't even surprised really because of the history in that area. The other people that have had crazy stuff happen right in that very area you were in. So
Yeah, and
it's
I
just
wasn't
one of those
aware.
things.
I had no idea.
That's the even better part. All these people having encounters independently of the same types of things with similar reported behaviors. Oh, but they're all just it's all in their heads, right? You guys are
Yeah,
all you guys are
right,
all inventing these details
right,
independently of one another.
right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but anyway,
Well, awesome, man. Thank you. You guys, please go check out Small Town Monsters and Beyond the Trail, Bigfoot Beyond the Trail. Please watch the Alaskan Coastal Sasquatch movie if you haven't yet, because it was amazing. It was so well done, and obviously 500,000 views in a week should tell you something. I will be back on what's today? Thursday. I will,
Thursday, yep.
I will be back on Saturday. I'll be back on Saturday night. I have something special planned. I'm not going to tell you what, but I'll be back on Saturday night. And until the next one, guys, I love you all. Please take care of yourselves. I will see you in a couple days. Have a great night.
Night, everyone.